OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
It's 7:30. You're very welcome along to Thursday's OTB AM. It's Eoin here with you right the way through until 10 o'clock, and we're joined in studio for today by Dan McDonnell of the Irish Independent. We're also going to be speaking this morning to Irish sailing sensation Eve McMahon. She's going to join us in the line very shortly. We're also going to be talking to Tommie Gorman ahead of a massive night for Sligo Rovers in Europe, and Clive Allen is going to help us look ahead to the Premier League as well. And our next episode of You Had to Be There is coming up in our middle hour this morning, with Dan picking his top 5 performances he's ever seen in the flesh. You can tweet us at Off The Ball. You can comment on the YouTube stream if that's where you're watching us this morning. Dan McDonnell, how are you getting on?
I'm good, Owen. How are you?
Very well. I guess as far as a night goes in Europe, the fact that we've got now 3 big competitions in Europe means that volume-wise we're getting bigger nights than ever, and tonight is going to be one of those for the Irish teams for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely. Shamrock Rovers were always probably going to be going at this stage, but I think the other two, Sligo Rovers and some Pats, the fact that they're involved adds something to it. It's the same as this time last year. There was 3 teams going, and it was Dundalk and Bows and Shamrock Rovers, and Dundalk and Bows went out valiantly at this round, and possibly shouldn't have in some ways, against Pauk and Vitesse, but they had to play extremely well to be competitive, and it feels like it's probably similar again. I mean, Sligo Rovers play Viking and Norway, who are a decent side, and Pats playing Ceska Sofia, who are pretty strong as well. So the nature of it is that basically, the domestic champion, who is Shamrock Rovers, end up in a slightly easier route, playing other champions, generally of teams that have been knocked out of the Champions League, and that's why their opponents, Shupi of Macedonia on paper, North Macedonia on paper, aren't as intimidating, whereas the non-champions have to play non-champions from other countries but stronger leagues, and that's effectively why you can get through a second round. Like, you have to beat a team like Motherwell or Mura from Slovenia, who are pretty good, but then you go up a level again, and it's really hard for those clubs. But in some ways they've the second round is like their cup final, in terms of even financially and stuff. Like Sligo Rovers have now made 850 grand. Pats is 750 because they got a bye through the first round, so they miss out just 100 grand less. It's real bonus territory for them, whereas the Shamrock Rovers one is different. It's more failure if they don't get through this round, or failure if they don't make group stages. So there's the 3 clubs are naturally all grouped together, as you do, but there's almost like a 1 and a 2, in terms of where they are in terms of expectation and realistic chances of progression, I suppose.
And is the hype building around Rovers that this could be a historic European odyssey?
It's funny, not especially, but it'll grow. We were just out there yesterday, the Shamrock Rovers press day, and the Shamrock Rovers crowds this year have been pretty good, and they're growing. And even last week when they played Ludogorets in that Champions League, sort of not dead rubber, because it wasn't, but they were 3-0 down, so in many people's eyes it probably was, and they still got 6,500 people still went to Tala, and they gave it a right go. They were still alive going into injury time, but it was still a game going into it. You were like, I didn't have the feel that day of it as a big game on tonight, because you're thinking, it's 3-0, this is game over. Whereas tonight is a bigger game. Yeah, I gather ticket sales are just a bit slower. I think it's in people's eyes, maybe it's like, who are they playing Thursday? Should be Macedonia. People know they have another game. Even if they lose this one, they have another go, and maybe it's not necessarily landing in people's heads that this is a really, really big game. But if they can win this tie over 2 legs, by next Tuesday they're guaranteed group stage football till December, and they've got 3 million sort of quid in the bank or whatever. And it's one of the biggest games, biggest ties in their history, realistically. But because the opponent isn't a team like even CSK Sofia or a more higher sort of grade team that maybe the message is slower to sink in with people of how important this game is, and maybe there'll be a big walk-up crowd later and it'll be the same sort of crowd they've had. But no, the hype probably hasn't built to the extent, but maybe that's no bad thing.
So Shupi not doing it for the people at Tala?
They're not it's not, the neutral isn't sort of thinking this is a game necessary that you have to see, yet it's as important as it comes, really. You speak to some of the players, and I sort of know some of the older players in the Rovers dressing room, and like some of them are at the stage of their lives. I think Gary O'Neill actually spoke about this a couple of weeks back, fellow Kerry man, of course, who basically said when Shamrock Rovers got AC Milan a couple of years ago, he was sick, and everyone would naturally assume dream draw, amazing. All he was thinking was, I've never played in the group stages, and we're basically gone now playing AC Milan. As much as you think, yeah, you can try and do a job on them, and there was those 90-minute COVID games, it wasn't two-legged. They were really good at 2020. Shamrock Rovers, you could argue, have they even hit those levels, since, because Jack Byrne was amazing in 2020 and hasn't quite got back to that. He might not even be fit to play again tonight.
What's his story?
Yeah, he's just been injured. Yeah, and he's
like, he could make the bench.
Might make the bench, but when you think that, like, at the start of the year you would have spoken about Rovers in Europe and Jack Byrne, and the fact they're in their 5th game tonight and he's played maybe 20 minutes off the bench in one of them, so you haven't even seen the best of him yet. But a lot of the players are now more obsessed about achievement than glamour.
That's for the fans, really.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the Milan game wasn't even for the fans, ironically enough, and it was a great buzz and a great story to tell in years to come. He played against Zlatan, but part of them were thinking, Dundalk went to group stages that year and Rovers were better than them. They're sitting at home going, what the hell's going on here? So I think there's a couple of them there who are just like, they don't care if it's low profile or there's no glamour in the ties. It's like, just get it done, get into the group stages, and then be in that draw, in Switzerland or whatever it is at the end of August, that day where you have all the European draws. That's just where they want to be. So they don't care really who they play, I think, in the intermediate, in the interest of the window to take them there.
So you expect Rovers to progress?
I think they have a really good chance in this tie. I think if they play as well as they can, I think they can progress. I sense a confidence off them. But the mad thing about it is, if they lose this tie, then they go into a two-legged tie with the champions of Kosovo or Faroe Islands to get into the group stages. So they're probably weaker teams even than the team they're playing tonight and next week. So
that probably is factoring into the whole kind of hype around it, maybe
100%. I think there's that safety net is there mentally in some ways,
And then I'm getting the sense that Sligo Rovers and St. Pat's possibly face uphill tasks.
Yeah, like, I don't want to be too negative about it because they've done incredibly well to get there, but the fact is, like, Sligo Rovers are mid-table, Pats are pretty much mid-table as well. Like, League of Ireland teams to do well in Europe, I would always feel need to be really strong, like on form League of Ireland sides, and neither of those would meet that criteria at the moment. So that's why it's incredibly impressive and encouraging that they've managed to negotiate their previous ties, and particularly, like, Sligo Rovers really sort of calculated against Motherwell after playing pretty poorly in the first round against the Welsh team. But they are hard ones. Like, the concern about Sligo Rovers would be that probably an edge that you have at this time of year generally is that you're playing teams that are just coming out of pre-season or a couple of games in. That's not the case if you play a team from Norway. They're mid-season, and the Norwegian results in Europe this year have been pretty good. Like, you see Bodo Glimt, who Viking aren't a million miles behind in the table. I mean, they beat Linfield 8-0. There was a red card, but last night they won their Champions League tie 5-0. And a couple of the other Norwegian teams have been doing pretty good. So they're mid-season, mid-flow. So that's a tough one. The Pats one, yeah, Sesko Sofia are probably similar. They're not as good as Ludogorets, but obviously Pats aren't as good as Shamrock Rovers, so you're trying to get a handle on the form there. But the Bulgarian clubs, like, they're 4 games into their season, they score a lot of goals. Pats are a good side on the counter attack, and they have the capability, I think, to absorb some pressure and do well in the game. But in saying that, they're right up against it. Yeah.
Okay, we will have more on Sligo Rovers this morning as well. It is 7:39. You're with us here on OTB AM, which is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Coming up over the next little while, we're going to be joined by Eve McMahon to chat about her success this year in her boat. Despite a leak in Houston last week, she has added another world title to her astonishing collection already. Tommie Gorman then is going to be our Sligo Rovers guest at 8:10 to talk about their journey so far this season. The sports page is coming your way at 8:30, and then John Duggan's Virtual Insanity at 9:20. After that, then Dan is going to be running through his top 5 live performances he's ever seen in football. You Had to Be There is our brand new slot, and it's coming your way at 10:09. And then Clive Allen will be with us at 9:10 to look ahead to the Premier League season. Is it something that excites you around this time of year, Dan, the Premier League, or do you kind of wait for the European stuff to kind of weigh?
Yeah, I'm not going to. I mean, I'm going to be in here talking about it on Saturday, but it always, I think this year it's come a little bit earlier because of the Qatar thing that's going on later in the year, obviously, that little thing, the World Cup, I believe it's known as. So it doesn't, like, you know, I really love the European ties and I love that time, but I mean, it's not that I'm not enthused by it either. It's just sort of, as you know, and it's like everyone would have maybe these feelings around it, particularly if you're maybe working around it, like the Premier League news cycle, you can both love it in a way, but also feel a bit smothered by it sometimes too.
What are you talking about? Yeah. There's just headlines about Cristiano Ronaldo on the back page.
I believe Ronaldo was done. You know, there's something happening with Ronaldo and Ten Hag. It's like, yeah, maybe it's just like, you know, the Manchester United stuff in particular has been so exhausting in the last period of time.
20 years at this stage.
Yeah, and so there's that small bit of not excited about some of that stuff, to be blunt.
Yeah.
I could do without that sort of constant post-mortem of that in my life, but I'm very interested by the Haaland thing. You know, very interested by Nathan Collins, Gavin Bazunu in the Premier League this year. So there's loads of stuff there that I'd be really sort of energised and looking forward to too. But obviously, it's the whole package with the Premier League. Like, you get the whole thing comes as one.
You can't just pick and choose. Yeah. Like, do you think we've bottomed out from an Irish perspective in terms of our Premier League involvement? Like, you know, like Nathan's always great for putting up the tweet at the end of the year about goal scoring and even Irish appearances at this point in the Premier League. Do you think we're finally going to see an uptick?
Can it go up? I mean, it is pretty, like, I mean, you realistically are looking at maybe 8 players seeing minutes this year, I think. Well, no, sorry, that's wrong. I think 7 sort of players who are more senior players. Evan Ferguson, I would presume, will be involved. He was on the bench for most of the second half of last season, albeit not necessarily only got on once. There are other younger players at clubs who might get minutes at later points of the season. It could surprise me, but that is low. Like, that is incredibly low. And you sort of feel that with the age profile of some of the better younger players in the squad, maybe it's bottoming out, but maybe it's also it's not far away from levelling off in some kind of place either. Like, I think maybe there was a time like this is obviously 30 years since the first Premier League season, when football began in 1992-93. This reference point, there was 32 Irish players that year. At the end of every season in the last 10-12 years, I would do sort of a ranking of Irish performances across it, and everyone who played a minute sort of gets into it. And there's been times in the last 10 years where even that's gone down to 24, 25, then down to like 15 or thereabouts, to be thinking of a year where it could be 8. You know,
okay.
I mean, worst case could be 6 if Shane Duffy for some reason left Brighton, which seemed like Stephen Kenny was even suggesting the other day he thought that might happen at the end of the season.
Yeah, it's not unthinkable.
It hasn't happened. So you feel like it'll get back up to 10, 11, 12, 13. You feel like the likes of the Norwich guys, you know, will get back there. You know, I feel like Jason Knight will probably get there at some stage. So in some ways, the fact that it's mainly younger players in that profile, you think it will go up, but the days of 30, 32, they're not coming back.
No, that's for sure. There are a couple of interesting things to kind of talk about in a wider context. Obviously, Matt Doherty is going to be a Premier League player this season, and kind of what maybe his expectations are this season. He's obviously got the highest ceiling in terms of an outfield player, obviously. You've also been kind of thinking as well about Aaron Connolly and his position this season, and even just Jamie McGrath's move is quite interesting. Stephen Kenny was asked about him this week.
Yeah, the Connolly one is very interesting. You know, the Venezia move. I mean, he's someone, again, the Connolly, when he scored those 2 goals against Spurs, 3 years ago now, you just assume he's going to be around for a long period of time. Although there would have been obviously concerns expressed then maybe about it's been a big talking point around football and like in Irish football. I think it will be well known in the last couple of years that Aaron Connolly, you know, there would be complexities to the character, you know, some concerns. I mean, he was effectively he was left out of Ireland under 19 squads, you know, due to probably some issues that there was there and maybe feelings around him there around the time of he made that Brighton breakthrough and that amazing breakthrough. And then you're looking at the other side going, yes, you know, under 19 management, Tom Moe and people who are regarded, they're not managers who sort of bomb people easily, you know. They maybe weren't mad at having Connolly around their squad, and then Stephen Kenny brought him back to the 21s, and they seem to have a good relationship. And yet, I unfortunately, some of people's predictions about what might happen for Connolly sort of came true, and he's given a very reflective interview last week where he's maybe spoken about acknowledging mistakes he's made, and he needs to maybe live his life in a certain way and move out of a certain circle of friends that he had. And you really just hope that the penny has dropped with it. I mean, Kenny spoke about it this week, and he didn't want to go too much into it, but then he sort of then he did back up things that Connolly said. Like Connolly said, Kenny had shown him a video along with Keith Andrews, who I think has a quite a decent relationship with Connolly, and they showed him a video of him against Azerbaijan, and he was effectively walking around the pitch. And I remember watching him in that camp, and he physically wasn't at it. And even Kenny just said Aaron Connolly used to be able to dribble. Like, he used to be a dribbler. That was one of his attributes. And he effectively said he looks to have lost that element from his game. And that tallies. Like, Aaron Connolly was thrilling watching him play for the 21s a couple of times, off the edge of your seat. Like, here he goes. He might take off and do anything here. And whereas last year it become sort of very inhibited, you watched him, and stodgy. And Connolly has said himself he was walking around the pitch and probably wasn't fit enough. So it's not game over for him, but it's a sort of a crossroads season for him too.
You would think that a player who was so exciting when he burst onto the scene, if he loses, in inverted commas, his dribbling ability, that's almost a good problem, because he will find that back. Like that is you would think a skill set / confidence thing.
You would think so. I mean, Kenny's point would be that Connolly always saw himself as a number 9, or Connolly always spoke about that. And as a number 9 at Brighton, a lot of what he was being asked to do was, he's a central striker as a number 9, make runs in behind, play on the edge of the shoulder, rather than being asked to sort of come out and take the ball and run at people. And it's true, like, that skill set is there, but the slight fear is that he's lost that little bit of explosiveness that he had, that sort of burst. And you presume if he gets to, like, he said that he's feeling fitter than ever, and he's had a pre-season now like he used to have 4, 5, 6 years ago. So we'll find out pretty soon on the pitch if that is the case, and if he's sort of retained that. But there is always just that fear, like, I think for Connolly, like, he got he got to the top of the mountain. Like, there's such dedication involved to get to where he did. Yeah. Like, you can't get there without having something, like a real focus and something about you. But obviously he got to the top of the mountain. He got the contract, the big contract, which is always the thing that the players are aspiring to aim. And then there's just been a big drop off since then. So you have to sort of, I'd imagine that financially he's probably pretty fine now. Like, he's on loan. So you lose a certain drive, I think, to get to sort of a certain level. And now he just needs to, he's realised that, okay, well, this could be my only big contract in a way. He's not saying that, but I think he would know after a couple of sort of, an uninspiring loan, and the fact that he's gone to Italy rather than, say, a championship club's fallen over themselves to get after him. His Brighton contract will end eventually, and what he does now will determine where he goes after it.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens this season with Aaron Connolly in Italy. Just one other story we wanted to touch on this morning, Dan, before we turn to sailing this morning, is just the situation with LIV Golf.
Yeah.
Obviously, as a keen golf fan, you've been following this quite a bit. There's talk of LIV going in for women's golfers, which would certainly, you would think, be more of a threat even to their game than to the men's game. And then obviously the big news is that Phil Mickelson and Ian Poulter are amongst the LIV 11 who are going to sue an antitrust lawsuit against the PGA Tour to challenge their suspensions.
Yeah, so it's, this is like sort of, terms like sort of civil war and stuff get used in sport all the time, but it really is.
This is cracked badge territory.
This is it. Like, but Poulter's involved in all of these lawsuits. He's everywhere. Poulter is sort of like one of these old WWE wrestlers who's like gone from the good guy into a heel overnight. Like, all of a sudden, like, it's like Poulter has produced a steel chair, and everyone's like, the Medina sort of focus and happiness and stare has suddenly turned into like someone staring deathly into the booing crowd, like he was in St Andrews this year, where he's booed and he's like, I didn't hear those boos, and everyone's like, but you are being booed.
It's fairly blunt writing from the people at home are even stroking their chin, like, this isn't very real.
This is like, what has happened to this guy? Because it's noticeable that this lawsuit thing, there's 11 players named in it, but there's no Brooks Koepka in it. There's no Dustin Johnson. This is more like, it's like the fundamentalist wing of the LIV guys. So it's got Mickelson, who's always been in there, like Pat Perez, who was going around with an outfit a couple of weeks back with like dollar notes on his gear, and he's always been a heel, like in that sense. And like Bryson is in there too. But yeah, the lawsuit, the detail, golf.com had a pretty interesting piece. If people want to learn more about it, it sort of broke down sort of 11 things in the lawsuit, and some great stuff in there, just confirming Bryson had signed for LIV earlier in the year, like back in February. It goes into sort of it's quite interesting, every quote that anyone has given in the last couple of years has been put in there. So like Rory McIlroy comments, Davis Love comments, various quotes from individuals, Jay Monaghan, anything they've said, it's been thrown in there to sort of to make the case of the guys who are claiming, you know, that their freedom to trade or whatever has been restricted, whatever way they're referring to themselves. They're independent contractors, you know, this is what they are. But there's just a lot more in there about Augusta as well. The information that apparently in February 2022, Augusta national representatives threatened to disinvite players from the Masters if they joined LIV.
Right.
So there's a lot of like private threats apparently that have been made behind the scenes that have been brought to the top of they've been named in this sort of lawsuit here. So just a lot more stuff, which is getting a lot more personal, and it's getting a lot more. There's a lot more mudslinging sort of going on here, and I presume there's going to be. I think there's been some kind of replies already from the PGA Tour side, but there's going to be more. And what was interesting is that like a while ago, Justin Thomas in particular was on this podcast, No Laying Up, the golf podcast, and he was particularly irate about the thought of the lawsuits. Like there's almost a sense that some of the players, they can understand people going and taking the money.
Yeah.
But they feel that if they start to take lawsuits, like I think Justin Thomas said, you're actually suing us, because the PGA Tour is technically some of the players on. So, you know, you're suing me, you're suing Rory, you're suing us all. But the depth of stuff in that lawsuit, and some of the allegations contained within it, which are only allegations, it's not leading us towards a happy resolution and conclusion in sort of a month's time here or something.
It's gone beyond mudslinging at this point. Like
it's gone way beyond it.
It's going to be really interesting to see how that develops. So that's the latest on the LIV Golf saga at this point. It is 7:52. You're with us here on OTB AM, which has been brought to you live each morning this week by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Now we're delighted to be joined by Dublin sailor Eve McMahon, who arrived home this week after capturing gold in the single-handed ILCA 6 class at the 2022 ILCA 6 Youth World Championships in Houston, Texas. That was on Saturday just gone. So this gold is Eve's third consecutive gold medal this year, having also picked up a gold at the World Sailing Youth World Championships in The Hague and at the ILCA 6 Youth European Championships in Greece. By the way, you can visit sailing.ie for all the latest in Irish sailing, including results and upcoming competitions, and what a time it is at the moment for Irish sailing. Eve, congratulations first of all. How are you getting on?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm getting on great. A bit of jet lag, but other than that, it's pretty much okay. I
can imagine that it's probably one of the easiest bouts of jet lag to get over. Can you talk us through the event at the weekend and how it all played out for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was kind of heading into Houston, Texas after just winning 2 gold medals. So there was a bit of pressure on myself. I was tipped as the favourite. So I was kind of just trying to shut that all off. And I just raced how I'd usually race. And it really did all pay off. So it was absolutely amazing to get the triple crown.
When you get out there, obviously there is a certain amount of the conditions that are completely out of your control. What were the conditions like in Houston, and did they play in your favour, or did you have a bit of work to do?
Yeah, it was quite windy, which I really, really like, especially with sailing with the youth fleet, and very, very choppy waves. So it was quite physically intense. And obviously I'd just done 2 major events before, so I was quite tired, but I knew that it was kind of my last event, so I just gave it my absolute all and pushed myself the whole way through. Is
that a common theme amongst all of the Irish sailors, Eve, that when you go abroad, especially to someplace across the Atlantic, that you are hoping for windy conditions because it is sort of like your home place?
Yeah, I suppose, well, we train out of Dunleary, so we do get a mix of conditions, but I think most Irish people, their favourite conditions is a bit of wind. We're used to it.
Can you talk us about what happened to the boat?
Yeah, that was actually surprising. It was the fourth day, and I'm quite particular about all the equipment that I use because I lost my Youth Europeans last year due to gear failure. So I'm quite particular with all that kind of stuff. And because we can't bring our own boats over to Houston, Texas, we have to kind of rent new boats. And the boat that I had just had a slight defect in it, and on the fourth day I came in off the water and there was actually water inside my boat, so it was a bit of a stress, a bit of a panic, but I was lucky enough to get it all fixed before I went out the next day.
Right, okay. I presume at that point, so you had to race the entirety of day 4 with a leak in the boat.
Yeah, I didn't know what was going on with it, to be honest. I felt slow that day, and I suppose that's why I felt a bit slow as well.
Right, okay. You would assume that would be fairly terminal for your chances on a single day, but obviously it wasn't too bad.
Yeah, no, I was going into the next couple of days a bit stressed because obviously you only can tell if there's water in your boat once you get in off the water. So I was a bit stressed, but I kind of just was like, you know what, I'm just going to race how I race, and if there's water in my boat, there's water in my boat.
There has to be, I'd assume, a certain degree of what will be when you're going to these events, considering, as you just say there, you don't get to bring your own equipment. You are essentially dealing with something that you're not 100% used to.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do it quite often because obviously we're living on an island here in Ireland, so it's much more difficult for us to bring our boats internationally. So I am quite used to renting boats, but I think the defect was just because of the extreme heat over there, that the boat, some of the stuff had actually, the silicone in one of the joints had actually melted off with the heat. Wow,
I hadn't even considered that. So how hot was it?
It was around 40 degrees.
Right.
It was absolutely crazy. The first couple of days, we had to really adjust to the heat because we were out in the water, and our races are very, very long and very intense. So straight away our heart rates were very, very high. So I went out there around a week early just to get used to the jet lag and used to the heat, and thankfully I did.
And how many of those, I suppose Netherlands is where you won one of your goals, Greece, obviously I presume the temperatures weren't as high as they were in Texas. So have you gone on warm weather training camps before now, or was this your first time really being thrown into those specific conditions?
This is, in terms of humidity, this is my first time being at that kind of level of humidity. Greece was actually quite hot as well, but just not the level of humidity that Houston was.
Can you talk us through what happened at Youth Europeans last year? Because you mentioned there was another gear defect.
Yeah, so I was also renting a boat as well, and it was my first race, and the inside rivets of my mast, which you can't see, were all like rusted inside, and then the first race that I did, I pulled on my kicker and my mast snapped. So that was a very, very unfortunate. So my first race out of a 12 race series, I had a DSQ, which was like a disqualification because I never got to race the race.
Oh God. So that was just a crap boat they gave you last time?
Yeah, basically, to be honest with you. But I think it's made me a much better sailor in general, just to be able to have that kind of experience, and then just racing with knowing that you have a disqualification was quite tough, but I think it's made me into a much better sailor.
And I'm sure that's something you can look back on now in hindsight and say that was a hugely constructive moment for me. At that particular moment, though, I presume that's not how you feel.
Yeah, no, I wasn't too happy back then, but that was the point where I kind of made my goal for this year to be able to win all three and get the Triple Crown, but obviously have my leaving cert in there as well, so I was a bit nervous going into all the three events, but it did all pay off. Yeah, for sure. The three events then this year, between Texas, Greece and the Netherlands, as I say, how different are all the courses on I guess a purely tactical level? Yeah, no, they're all completely different in terms of like land geographical effect. So, I didn't get a lot of time in between each event because they were all so back to back. So I was kind of just flying from each country to the next, with four or 5 days of training just to get used to the conditions. And then I had to rest a little bit and then straight into the events. So they were very much back to back, so it was quite difficult to get used to each condition, and each condition was so different that you'd come off racing off one event thinking you'd know the conditions, and then you go to a different venue and you get used to a completely new wave condition and wind condition, so that was quite tough as well. So you're basically, I presume, on the road straight after the leaving cert this summer? Yeah, I was absolutely gagging to get away. Like literally 3 days after, I was on my flight to Greece getting ready, prepping for the Youth Europeans in Greece. Right.
Yeah, like Eve, a lot of people will just rightly or wrongly, a lot of sports fans in this country will tune in to sailing matters around the Olympics. That's just the nature of it. But I was interested to read that you were, like, Annelise Murphy has been the sort of the flagship person in that world in the last decade, and you were her training partner coming up to Tokyo, and you've been sort of spending a fair bit of time with her. So that must be sort of a terrific insight that you've gained.
Yeah, it was absolutely huge. I joined her in Australia for the Senior Worlds, and then we had a training camp in Lanzarote when the Olympics were postponed for 1 year, and we just spent quite literally 1 year in Lanzarote, and we teamed up with the Danish Olympic team. So between Anne-Marie Rindon, the Danish sailor who won gold, and then training with Annelise as well, you know, I was with one of the best training groups in the world. So that was quite huge for me.
So you're sort of, you compete in the same boat class as her as well, right? Like, it's the same discipline as such. It's because I know there's different grades, but it's the same one.
Yeah, no, we're both competing now in the ILCA 6 Olympic class women's boat. So I'm in the same boat as she previously was. So it was amazing to be able to line up and compare speed and just get all the little nuggets of wisdom, I suppose, between the two girls.
That experience with the Danish team, is there anything they do differently or anything you learned that kind of blew you away a little bit?
Not really. I think it was more just the humbleness of everybody around that training group, you know, really drawed my attention to them. Like, they were just such a humble group of sailors, and we all got on like an absolute house on fire. So the entire training group experience and atmosphere was one of the best I've ever sailed in. So it was just really nice to be able to learn from the best.
So it's almost kind of like a sports psychology aspect that they bring to things, as opposed to anything they're doing differently in the boat.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, sailing has so many different variables, so it's very much so you have to keep your mind in check all the time. You know, one little thing can go wrong and you've lost a lot of places in the race. So I think just learning, you know, and hearing their experiences and what they've been through, and just learning how they dealt with it has been huge.
That psychology piece is interesting, because earlier on in this conversation you mentioned that come the third competition this year that people knew you'd won 2 gold medals. People had you marked out as the favourite potentially. How has that mindset shift been from you, going from one of the people in the pack to being a leader in this sport?
Yeah, you know, I really do try to block all that out. And when I'm in the event, you know, I just go into each race thinking it's a completely new race. I don't even look at results kind of during the event, which is actually what a lot of sailors do. And I just race how I would usually race, not thinking about anybody who's potentially, you know, a threat to me or coming second. So it definitely was big, because I'd seen a lot of the stuff about, and heard obviously from other sailors about, you know, I'd be getting text messages in saying I'm 2 from 3, 2 out of 3. So obviously then going for the 3 out of 3. So that was quite tough, but I just kept my sailing completely simple and tried to turn all that kind of stuff off. Okay,
so even in the middle of an event that would be a couple of days long, you would not look at the results or try and block it out as much as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, the days are 6 days long, and, you know, one race starting over the line, you know, that can absolutely throw your event. So you can't really get too ahead of yourself in sailing, because one little mistake and it's all down the tubes.
What happens next now, Eve? Like, where does the season go from here?
Yeah, so I've kind of actually only just begun my summer, to be honest with you. So I have a little bit of rest now, and I'm heading off then to the under-21 Worlds in August. So that's like a little category stage up. And then I have also then my senior worlds back in actually Houston, Texas, and then the senior Europeans. But I'm quite comfortable sailing in all 3 categories, because I've sailed in all 3 since I was 15. I really tried to get into the senior level at a very early age. So I'm quite used to the senior level. And then, you know, it's just then trying to qualify for Paris as well. And
then obviously you mentioned you've just done your leaving cert. What's the plan on that front?
Yeah, I get my results in a month's time. So I've kind of forgotten about that one, to be honest with you. But I'm getting my results in a month's time, so I'm hoping for the best.
And what is the hope, college-wise?
I'd love to go to University College Dublin. I got the Ad Astra Elite Sports Scholarship, so that was huge. So I figured that out before I sat my leaving cert. So that was a little bit of pressure off. And, you know, it's an amazing college. So I'm really hoping that I'll be able to represent UCD.
Good stuff. And can I ask, have you thought at all about Paris? Is that something you can allow yourself to think about?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, because I was a training partner for Tokyo, I always had my sights set, I suppose, on Paris and then LA as well after that. So that's what I do. I go out and train every day for Paris, and I'm just very much so looking forward to hopefully qualifying.
How competitive is that going to be within the Irish camp?
Yeah, so at the moment, there's one other sailor who I'll try and compete against during the trials. And then we have we have to qualify the nation first, and then we have 3 trials after that. So it is definitely a tough qualification, but I am confident in myself. Because
essentially it's teamwork to get Ireland into the Olympic Games, and then it becomes teammate versus teammate to see who actually wears the green of Ireland. Is that correct in how the games would work?
Yeah, exactly. So the qualifying the nation, you know, we have to, I think it's like top 50 or something at the World Championships. So it is a bit of a team effort, but in the other sense, we are also sailing for ourselves. Well,
it's a very, very good problem to have over the next couple of years, Eve. Congratulations on everything over the past few months, and great to chat to you this morning.
Thank you so much.
Cheers. That's Eve McMahon, Irish sailor, there on the line. It is 8:06. You're with us here on OTB AM. It's Eoin and Dan McDonnell with you right the way through until 10 o'clock. Now, Off the Ball is going back to Vicar Street, and it's in association with Cabri FC. We've got a massive roadshow coming your way on August the 17th, where we'll have Michael Owen, Ian Wright, Emma Byrne and Karen Carney on stage. There should be some great stories on the night as 4 legends of the game reminisce about their careers and preview the 2022-23 season. This is an exclusive off-air event, and tickets go on sale at 9 o'clock this morning across our social channels. And a reminder that ticket proceeds will go towards supporting Irish women's grassroots football. Terms and conditions apply, and see you on the night. Right, after this break, we're live with the legendary broadcaster Tommie Gorman ahead of his beloved Sligo Rovers Europa Conference League third qualifying round against their game against Viking this evening. First, here are Joe and the lads on last night's Off the Ball, talking about the sounds of sport that they love. Back after these.
What is the best sound in sport? And he gives his top 3. Mine, in at number 3. See, I thought this was a ridiculous text until I read the top 3, and then I thought, do you know what? I'd actually debate that with you, because I changed the order. Mine, he says, mine number 3, an F1 car. See, I heard that and I thought, okay, I sort of see what he's getting at.
He's sincere.
Yeah, he's thought about it. Number 2, the ping of a driver.
Yeah, that's right up there.
Absolutely. Number 1, the crack of a net in Italian football. So I presume he means the stadium sound.
Yeah, I think it's the net sound. They must have specific nets in this area, do they?
What's an Italian net?
I don't know. The sound of Steve Staunton banging one in against United in 1993 was the greatest sounding goal of all time.
It is an interesting... Sorry, it's not an interesting question, but I would...
Let's make that clear.
I might go for a well-struck iron shot in golf, the compression of the ball. I might stick that in.
That whoosh sound off the driver.
Beautiful
thing. It's just... oh, God.
I've never been to Formula 1 track, but I presume the sound of the cars is outrageous.
So loud.
Have you been?
Yeah. I was at the Melbourne Grand Prix there a number of years ago.
Oh, yeah.
But it is, you don't have a clue what's going on at a Grand Prix.
It doesn't strike me as a spectator sport.
Unless you're near a big screen, like you're just seeing these flashes of, like you're standing beside like a net or a cage or something like that, and you're just seeing these flashes of colours going through you, and sure, you don't know where they are on the track, whether they've been who's fighting it. It's like you haven't a clue. So you're just looking at a big screen the entire time.
It'd be up there for worst spectator sports, would it?
Yeah, but at the end, there's a good atmosphere and there's a lot of drinking, and then at the end you kind of can go down onto the grid and stuff like that. So well, it depends where you are.
I guess it has that visceral thing of the noise of the cars. Yeah. You probably come away going, or during it you're thinking, this is not fair, I can't see anything, but you kind of come away having experienced something.
Yeah.
Feel it in your gut almost.
Yeah, like I don't know if you've ever been to horse racing as well. It's like, the live experience isn't really the watching, because you're only able to see a small portion of the track, and it's hard to take in where everybody is. So again, you're watching a big screen the entire time. It's not like when you go to a match.
Yeah.
It's there in front of you, So that was my experience with Formula 1. It's like while I cared about what was happening, I was watching a TV screen in the outdoors near the track.
Yeah.
I love the sound of a snooker referee counting up the score.
I was going to say something
sad.
What is that?
Oh my God.
As in like saying 1, 8, 9.
Counting up the score. There's something about that
16.
that I love. I love the repetition of it. I love the predictability of it.
Very soothing.
It's fantastic. The same thing with the balls and everything going in and everything. But there's something about that.
You know what I love in snooker? The crowd. You know when there's a shot like that you don't. But they all have the earphones in.
And
so
they listen to commentary. And then when they laugh.
When they laugh,
I
yeah,
love that so
but the sound that I love particularly is if there's a real shotter that's like it's a tough one, but it's gonna capture the frame.
Yeah.
And it's like he'll try something outrageous, and the ball is only halfway to the pocket, but the commentator immediately knows it's going in, and then there's a uprise of the crowd before the ball pops into the pocket. You know, it's a very specific thing, but it did come into my head when it's not as weird as Arthur's one though.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Have you subscribed to the OTB Football Podcast?
You're a United fan with Dennis Irwin and Roy Keane's team and John O'Shea coming through. It's a very different team that you're looking at.
It's I don't know how we didn't think of that sooner. Yeah. That is such a good point, because even now when Premier League years is on, if United are, the first thing you'll check is Keane or Irwin playing? And even if they're showing a Chelsea game and Duffer's playing, you're 20 times more invested.
You think that there's a good chance, I suspect, that Antonio Conte is the man.
Tottenham finished second.
Subscribe now to the OTB Football Podcast stream wherever you get your podcasts and download the OTB Sports app.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
You're welcome back. It is 11 minutes past 8. You're with us here on OTB AM. Now, tonight's Sligo Rovers tie with Viking begins in Norway. It is the Conference League, and former Northern editor and Europe editor with RTE, but most importantly, Sligo Rovers super fan Tommie Gorman is with us on the line. Good morning to you, Tommie. How are you getting on?
Great form. You live for mornings like this where you're looking forward to your team playing for the first time in the third round of a European competition. And you can just imagine what it's like for those young lads this morning. Like, we have fellas from Mayo and from Leitrim and from Sligo and from Donegal and elsewhere. But you can imagine what it's like for them in their young lives, looking forward to going out and playing in a major stadium in Norway tonight. Just living the dream, really.
What is it like for you at this point in your life as somebody who's, I guess, known Sligo Rovers your entire life, for as long as you can remember? You've known Sligo Rovers. What is this feeling like as you look forward to tonight?
Well, this time 45 years ago, I was in my first job in journalism, and Sligo Rovers that year, they had won the league and they qualified in the European Cup to play against Red Star Belgrade. So I was going to the match in Yugoslavia. And, you know, I still treasure those memories. They're still very fresh 45 years on. So as a fan today, you're just so conscious that, like, you really need to fuel the dream every so often, you know, to fill up the tank by qualifying for European competition, because the finances of it are so important. And the model we have in the showgrounds, community-owned club, people's club, we need days like this to get young lads into our academy. And we also need, say, a run like this for our finances, because if you look at the kind of money that's generated by, say, getting into a third round, it's probably about 750,000 net. And that's, you know, more than 50% of what it takes to run the club per year. So you need that kind of cash injection to stay, you know, in that top group in the Premiership. You look at, say, the likes of Shamrock Rovers, who will get a run this year in the Champions League, then the Europa League, and if they fall out of that, the Conference League. That's worth over $1 million, maybe $2 million to them in a season like this. So you can see why they're so far out front within the League of Ireland with that kind of finance coming in. Big day for Pats as well, European game, third round as well. So very important for them and for the chasing pack. And I also think it's such encouragement for that breed of young manager that we have in the League of Ireland now. You know, very, very good, committed guys, you know, from, you know, the Stephen Bradleys to, you know, Damien Duff has his track record. We have young John Russell, you have the likes of Stephen O'Donnell, you've got Tim Clancy, and even somebody like Ollie Horgan, who's down there struggling with Finn Harps at the bottom of the league today. He aspires to get into a European round like this with Finn Harps. So it's such a good advertisement for the league today. So we should all be kind of proud today, I think.
For sure. Can I ask, how many Sligo people made that trip to Yugoslavia all those years ago?
small number. Some of the committee members, and it was on a scheduled flight. And say, for instance, with the Rovers this time around, we were lucky in the first 2 rounds because we were in Bala in Wales, low costs and easy for fans to get to. And then we were blessed in the second round, Motherwell. Again, you could travel across to Scotland, handy enough. Today's different. So the team and the few committee members who've gone with them, they had to travel from Belfast across to Aberdeen. And then they got a flight from Aberdeen across to Norway. So that becomes more expensive. But interestingly, the second leg of the Viking game in the showgrounds that takes place this day week, that's already sold out. And the club made the deliberate decision to not move it to, say, the likes of Tala, because that would mean huge expense for our supporters. But by doing so, by keeping it in Sligo, you're only going to get 3,800 fans into the showgrounds because it has to be an all-seater. That's the rule. And we had to get permission from UEFA to actually stage it in the showgrounds. We had to get a derogation because normally for a third round match, you'd need to be in a stadium that can hold at least 5,000 seated. So we got that derogation. But we literally could have sold another 2,000 or 3,000 seats in the showgrounds handy a week in advance. And that's the kind of decision you make. And that's where the finances become important, because what we're looking to do in the longer term is to have a stadium that'll hold 5,000 or 6,000 people, where you'd be able to accommodate all your support base on a night like this.
Tommie, I was in Sligo last week for the game, and it was like I got down in the mid-afternoon and everywhere you looked there was Sligo Rovers jerseys. Like, the place was heaving, the atmosphere across the day was brilliant, and like I'm guessing that must be up there in terms of the nights, the sort of the European nights, because Sligo Rovers had a lot of big nights in Europe, but not necessarily big wins. Like, there was a lot of sort of, you know, runs where they lasted for one tie, for one game. But this must be sort of right up there in terms of like cementing memories for the next generation, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, you're 1,000,000% on the money. You know the location of the showgrounds. It's in the centre of the town. It's a 12-acre site. And everybody in the area knows the Rovers. They're of the people. But to get to a third round is new territory for us. And like the pictures, the television pictures were fantastic. I saw at one stage there was a shot of a group of people behind the goals in the television feed. And I spotted in there Aidan Keena's partner and their little baby. And you could see that, you know, they were close to the goals that he was going to be shooting into. And then, you know, a number of times the ball went out of play behind the goals, and you cut to the shots of the young lads catching the ball and holding on to it, trying to kill a few seconds in the game to sort of try and take the steam out of any challenge that was coming from Motherwell. But of course, it was a magnificent achievement in its own right, the match you were at, because Motherwell are a Premiership club in Scotland. And for a club like Sligo Rovers to actually beat them in the home game in Motherwell, and then to come back to the showgrounds and to put not just one but two past them, like that was really, really magnificent. It's interesting what has happened with the Rovers in the last few weeks. Liam Buckley brought the club from a bad place. He stabilised it. We got European qualification twice under him, and Rovers will be forever grateful to him for doing that. And he had really good values. But then the management committee had a big decision to make because the results were going against us. Part of the problem was our own pitch at the start of the season and the kind of football Liam wanted to play. That wasn't his fault. But they brought in John Russell, Liam's assistant. And that was hard to end the relationship with Liam. But John Russell seems to be a lucky general, because in the game against Bala, in the showgrounds match, Bala beat us out the gate. They had a team of really wise characters who came to win. And only for Ed McGuinty in that match, he saved us during the match, he saved us in extra time, and then he saved 2 penalties. And there was something beautiful about the way it ended for him, because he's a lovely young fella. He came to us after Celtic and Hibs had let him go. They said he was too small. He came up through our academy system. and his contract was due to run out in November, and he could have left for nothing. But he was keen that if he did go to across the water, that there'd be some money in it for the club that had helped him. So we got a decent transfer fee for him with some add-ons if he sold on to another club. And then we had another young keeper called McNicholas, who had been playing with them. We had him out on loan in Cliftonville last year, and his contract was due up in November as well. And he was wondering, am I going to get first team football? So it worked out beautiful for us in the end that Ed McGinty got away to Oxford, and now we've got young McNicholas in on a full-time contract with us, a new contract, and he's playing in tonight's match. So in that respect, things have fallen nicely for John Russell. Now the downside of it is we were put out of the cup by Wexford last weekend. The same happened to Pats. They were beaten by Waterford. And you can see that pattern there for clubs that are making it to Europe, that sometimes it's such a stretch in the resources that they can't sustain their league or their cup form in Ireland. But if you were to ask me, would you take, the results that we've had in recent weeks, including the defeats, I'd bite your hand off for them. It's just a lovely time for the Rovers.
Tommie, has Sligo Rovers always been in your life? It's one of the... people talk about League of Ireland football, and there's parts of the country that don't have a League of Ireland team. There are parts of the country that do have a League of Ireland team, but it maybe doesn't necessarily penetrate the sort of local discussion in the same way that, say, the inter-county GAA scene might. But Sligo seems very different to me. I think Dundalk, and there's one or two other places that might be like that. But from day one, was Sligo Rovers always there for you, if you know what I mean?
I love sport. This is a great year for Irish rugby. I follow Spurs. Things are coming on well there. I followed Spurs since I was 5. But the one result that really matters to me, the most important one, is always Sligo Rovers. Because they really are of the people. They're what defines us as a place. And most people in Sligo are like that. It's a garrison town. And you're right, there are places like you have great affection for clubs like Pats, you have great affection for the likes of Bowes. Shamrock Rovers had awful times where they were wandering around the city until they found their home in Tala. Cork have great support, Limerick have great support. And it's kind of sad, I think, in some respects, that this year's League of Ireland, you've got 5 teams in Dublin, you've got 2 in Louth, and you've got 3 in the Northwest. So if you draw a line from Dublin to the Northwest, all those good soccer towns like Athlone, Galway have a good club, Limerick have a good club. There's nothing in Kilkenny. Wexford are in the 2nd division. And Cork, wonderful, wonderful town. Remember Roy Keane came up through Cove Ramblers. It's really sad that, big centres like that don't have a team in the Premier Division. And we count our blessings in Sligo that we're not in the 2nd division, what is the second tier, the 1st division, because that would be such a difficult division to get out of at the moment. It's so competitive. So yeah, these are good times with the Rovers. And a lovely thing about it is the way the academy system is working for us at the moment. In the past 12 months, 3 of our players, Johnny Kenny, John Mahon and Ed McGinty, have got across the water, to try and pursue their career there. And last weekend, we had a fantastic result because this is the first time we've had a senior ladies team. And they pulled off, a magnificent result last week where they beat really fine club, league leaders at the moment, where they beat Shelburne 3-2 at the showgrounds. So all those different elements of, say, the ladies' presence now, you see all the young girls in the showgrounds training, most days now in the all-weather pitch at the front of the showgrounds. And then the youth team, that's the youth teams that are coming through and the academy players that are making it into the Rovers. And the guys we have, say, managing the side that's in Norway tonight, John Russell and Ryan Casey, they've come up through our underage structures. And John Russell himself is a wonderful example of what's going on in the League of Ireland. His sister, Julianne Russell, is a really fine player. John played with us. He played with Pats, got his degree in DCU, has done his badges. He's from Galway. His father and mother are real soccer people, always encourage their kids to get involved in sport. So you can see the fruits of the effort that families put into sport. You can see those coming through in Sligo Rovers at the moment.
Tommie, we have a photo here actually that you sent to us earlier on, you kneeling on the goal line there, praying for something a short time ago. When was this photo taken? What tell us the story of this pic.
That was the night of the miracle against Bala. There was one stage in the second half, in extra time, where they were pounding that goals, where you see me on my knees giving thanks after the match. And a guy headed the ball against the crossbar, and everyone was on the ground, no hope of saving any rebound. And a fella comes in and he catches the rebound on the volley, and he hit the crossbar. And there was this spontaneous lift of about 3,500 people in the stand. They just knew we hadn't dodged one bullet, we had dodged a machine gun. And everyone just got up and started chanting Rovers, Rovers. And we got to the end of that match, and then it went to penalties. And young McGuinty and the people advising him, they had actually studied the penalty taking techniques of Bala. So he went the right direction for all 5 penalties, and he stopped 2 of them. So it was a miracle that we got out of that one. And that allowed us to get into the round against Motherwell. And to be honest with you, when we drew Motherwell, I said, that's it. It's fantastic that we've got to a second round. And, we won't be greedy. And if we can get out of this, that losing, by 2 or 3 in the overall over the 2 legs, you'd be content with that. But to actually beat Motherwell and to get into the third round, this is such fun.
Are you going to be greedy tonight when you're looking to tonight's fixture and next week's fixture? Are you thinking, yeah, let's have it?
We're modest kind of people. It doesn't suit us to be greedy. And we're very, very thankful in agriculture terms, in some respects, the hay is saved, because we probably now have banked sufficient resources to keep this level of a full-time professional team on the go for the next 2 years. And hopefully we've qualified for Europe at some stage during that 2-year period again. And the other brilliant thing about it is this really helps us to make our case for state aid for our development plan for the showgrounds. Our centenary is in 2028. And our hope is that we will have a bigger showgrounds with a new pitch, new stands, and better commercial activities there by 2028. Another little interesting anecdote to tell you, one of our big supporters is a guy called George Mullen, and he puts in pitches all around the world. He has put in World Cup pitches in Qatar, he put in pitches in Russia, he's put them in many of the major stadiums. He's actually doing a pitch in South America at the moment. But George Mullen installed a new pitch in Motherwell. And the first game, the game that christened that pitch, the first competitive match, was the game that Sligo Rovers beat Motherwell 1-0. So one of our own helped us in that.
It's kind of one of the things that kind of really sticks out, Tommie, from listening to you talk this morning, is just that phrase about the club being of the people. You mentioned that a couple of times this morning, and it does feel that seems to be part of the relationship between the fan group and the playing group, regardless of where the players have come from. And there is a lot of people who are very much homegrown and are of the place as well. But it does seem that there is as much a very, very close relationship between the fans and the players, almost on an intimate level, that they know the ins and outs of each of the players, and almost vice versa. Is that the case from your perspective as a fan of the club?
Absolutely. It keeps us honest as well, because there were so many financial crises in the showgrounds over the years that the ground would have been sold or mortgaged many times over just to keep us afloat, if we had been able to do that. But the way it's structured, the ground is owned in trust for the people, so you can't do that. And Sligo, it's 15, 20,000 people, counties 65,000. So there's no big sugar daddy. Some of the other clubs like, Shamrock Rovers have got Dermot Desmond, they've got their pitch provided by the local authority. Duggan Dundalk have got an investment. Even Galway have got the Comers, who are very, very helpful to them. Pats have got Gareth Kelleher. Bows are a bit like ourselves, but, you know, they've got very valuable real estate. But we don't have, Derry have, you know, very, very benevolent chairman at the moment, but we don't have anybody with that kind of money. And we can't take in, you know, private sector investment that would risk the future of the club. So basically, we eat what we kill. We have to generate our own revenue every year, you know, through golden goals. And we have a network of people. There's a former chairman of Sligo Rovers called Dermot Kelly. He's an anaesthetist in the eye and ear and in St. Vincent's in Dublin. And Dermot was a fantastic chairman when we were flying high in the years when we won the league and the cup a decade ago. Dermot helped to build what we call the Volkswagen stand in the showground. We still have to put a roof on it. But Dermot Kelly has more clients and friends in Dublin who are in our 500 club, throwing in 240 quid a season on a direct debit system every year. And that kind of stuff is vital. So we rely on that kind of finance all the time. And like, even for, say, a game like Viking, it was very important for us that the commercial side of the club, and most of these people are volunteers, but that the commercial side of the club were actually selling out next week's match, just in case, you know, you went down 5-0 tonight and all the air was taken out of the balloon. We know that we're going to have a great night and a financially successful night in the showgrounds this day week, because, you know, sold out showgrounds with golden goals and match program sales, the revenue you generate from that will probably pay the cost of getting the team to Norway, the flights, the hotels, and whatever else you need, the food. So you have to be thinking like that in a club like Sligo Rovers all the time. It's a kind of a sad dimension to it in a way that you can never concentrate fully on what's going on the pitch, because you're also wondering how much have you taken in the turnstiles.
Yeah, for sure. Listen, Tommie, the very best of luck over these next two nights. Hopefully it's another very famous night for Sligo Rovers. Try and enjoy it as much as you can, and hopefully we'll chat to you again soon. Thanks a million.
Thank you, and thanks for the interest.
Cheers. Tommie Gorman there, formerly of RTE there on the line, Sligo Rovers. You can't but root for them.
Yeah, I met that fella George Mullen, actually, the pitch. He laid the pitch for the World Cup final in Russia. Right. 2018, so I did a piece of him out there at the time, so their company are a global force. But I mean, it's so much of what sort of Tommie there sort of strikes a chord. Like when you think, like I walked into the ground for the game last Thursday, and I would know a couple of people on the board, and like straight away, like they were like, you know, put this out there, and everyone who came into the ground, they were handing them a flyer saying, become a member of the club, here's what your ownership will get you. You know, they're selling tickets, fundraising, whatever. It's a constant battle. Like it is a club, as he alludes to there, that's sort of member owned. So it's not like they have someone that can write a check to write the shortfall at the end of the year. It is one where the European money really does mean everything, and it's the weird reality of football in this country where domestic prize money is so low. There's no TV deal, no TV funds, which makes it a bit of a, you know, UEFA do these benchmarking reports from around Europe, and you see where people get their income from, and like TV deals is such a big part of the play in most countries, and that doesn't exist here. So clubs like Sligo Rovers just have to fundraise like mad and tap into a community that is passionate, but they give a lot back too. I mean, like I thought it was really nice last week after, I think Sligo GAA put out a tweet, and I think, you know, really supportive. And I found it very bizarre. I think was it Tony McEntee, who's the manager now, at one point in the last year, I think I might even have been on here, he was on about, like, you know, the interest in Sligo Rovers, and it's a bit of a fool's goal, because I'm not sure there's any, you know, there's many Sligo people playing with the team. I was just thinking that, going, that's so out of sync with the reality. The great thing about what Sligo Rovers have done in the last couple of years is that they have a local academy that is churning out local players, not just from Sligo, but from Leitrim and Mayo, as sort of Tommie mentioned there. Like, you have Niall Morahan playing last week from Leitrim Town. Caelan Barlow, a young lad come on for Sligo, was very good. Previously they've had Johnny Kenny, who's gone to Celtic from playing from his local club, John Matten at St Johnstone, and there's a raft of them there through a pretty strong academy that they have that's providing opportunities for like young footballers in the region to play football professionally, but also go on to another level. And in other parts of Ireland, it's quite fractious, even the relations between the League of Ireland club and schoolboy football, or between other, wings of the game. There's been issues even in Donegal, in Cork, there's all sorts of disputes. But in Sligo, generally, a lot of people are on the same page, and they recognise what a strong local football club can do for their community in tandem, in line with all the other sports, and I think they are looking at sort of this master plan, this stadium vision, which may see some sort of crossover with that. And I know, obviously, I do love going there because it's sort of a vision for maybe how football can sit into the sporting ecosystem, that word, in a place. And in other parts of Ireland, it's a lot more fractious. And actually in Sligo it's sort of working, and that's why I'm very glad to see them sort of get these big nights.
It wasn't a show actually that Tony McAnally said.
I couldn't believe it.
The biggest problem we have in Sligo is the soccer. Soccer does well, but I think in my view it's slightly fool's gold looking at the soccer piece, because I'm not sure there's that many homegrown Sligo players playing with Sligo Rovers. He does, to be fair. The second we would have then would be potentially rugby, and we have a few players that would be very good at the rugby as well, and Connacht rugby would be reasonably strong. He says, so for good or bad, the actual issue that impacts us most in the football end is the hurling as well. So he kind of it was qualified, but it's just wrong, really. Like, I mean, they do have a lot of. They also have a couple of guys from New Zealand, and they've always had to bring in outside managers and players, because they actually find it very hard to get people from Dublin, the players in the Dublin region to move to move out west as such. Is actually easier. They always have a stream of players. So they've 2 New Zealand internationals there at the moment. They have an Estonian fella. They signed a guy on loan from Leipzig last week, because they find it hard to get sort of the Dubs or the people from this neck of the woods to move across. But what they do have now, noticeably, is a number of like their own academy graduates from the area, not just Sligo, but as I said, Leitrim and Mayo, the goalkeepers Mayo, who are getting a chance to play football in, without having to travel, without having to go somewhere else, which would have been the traditional thing. In fact, you would have had the likes of Alan Cawley and people like that who would have actually gone to travel to play their schoolboy football in Dublin when they were younger. That you had to go and play in Dublin at schoolboy level to be spotted. So I think if, the FAI and any strategy plans and stuff that they're doing, if they want a template for actually how things could work, I think actually Sligo was a pretty good one. Yeah.
So I found, there's a good story behind that there. Yeah.
Right. It is 8:37. OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. It is time for the sports pages.
There are so many idiots out there, so many spoofers. There's a lot of horse. I think he's a total spoofer.
What do you mean a spoofer?
He's just bullshit.
No, Eamon, come on, don't be. No, I'm not having that. No.
In an ad break a few minutes ago, you'll have heard the lads last night talking about their favourite sports sound. Arthur had a kind of messed up one, to be kind of honest with you. The man counting.
Arthur had the intro in a therapy session. Yeah. I think, to be honest.
Does that ring any bells for you, or do you have a different one?
I was thinking about obscure sporting sounds or bizarre ones. To me, right, I love the uncomfortable murmur of an Irish football crowd when someone passes the ball backwards. That when they pass it towards a goalkeeper or back towards in a defensive position, and there's just that tangible what's actually after happening here. Because I remember even in Sligo last week, which like they're a team that plays like passing football, but there will always be a class of fan attending a game here that just wants the ball in the box. And I'm sure you'll experience it at the Aviva as well, and even in the Stephen Kenny's team trying things. There was a couple of games where you could sense this unease with going back to Bazunu or going back to, or the short kickouts, and it's just a particular sound. And I think some of those short kickouts didn't work out particularly well in Ireland, but that sound of the crowd,
the groan,
it's just a little subtle one, because they had, I think, the really good Dundalk team a couple of years back, like Stephen Kenny's Dundalk team, like they would be well aware of this as well too. That I think apparently even in training they'd like if they strung like 5 or 6 really good passes together, you know, but going defensively, going back, someone would shout like, you know, get it in the box, Dundalk, because that's exactly what the chant from the crowd would be. But sometimes it's not actually vocalised. There's no rant. It's just that unease.
For sure, that's very good one, the groan. I'm just looking through the back pages here, and it is Manchester United that dominate things once again this morning. The Irish Independent leads with the headline, United boss sees red over Ronaldo antics. Irate Ten Hag calls out strikers unacceptable behaviour as exit saga takes another twist. Meanwhile, Donncha Boyle reporting that Bohan is linked to the Rossies vacancy. This is Mick Bohan, who has obviously been manager of the Dublin ladies football team, has been linked to the job that Anthony Cunningham has just walked away from. And Stephen Bradley has warned his Shamrock Rovers players that another bad half hour could kill their group stage dream, as the League of Ireland European representatives face into another huge night. So it is going to be a couple of big days this week and next for the League of Ireland clubs in Europe. The back of the Irish Sun goes with tension. Eric tells Ronaldo early exit was unacceptable. Get fit if you want to play. And another headline there, it's Mark Madness. Confusion reigned last night over Chelsea's move for Brighton's defender Marco Correa. Seagulls chiefs were forced to release a statement denying claims they had agreed to sell him for £52.5 million. And also the headline there on the Irish angle, Rovers, St Pat's and Sligo Rovers will hope to soar in Europe again tonight after taking flight whatever way they can. So with Dublin Airport still under pressure, Pats followed Sligo's lead by flying out of Knock.
Knock is getting a lot of action in Europe this year.
Yeah,
like Knock has seen more European football here than some football clubs have in a long period of time.
Knock is an underrated airport on the way back. Back page of the Mirror, it's all gone wrong. Cristiano fury after Ten Hag calls early exit unacceptable, and it's all gone young. Blues bid to nab Frankie. So Chelsea have made a sensational move to hijack Frankie de Jong's move to Manchester United. See you later. No way back for Ron after Eric slams Icon's early exit. There's that de Jong story. And St Pat's boss Tim Clancy says the officials must take appropriate action if there are racist incidents in tonight's Europa Conference League clash in Sofia. The Irish Examiner this morning, their sports section goes with Fantasy Islands, how Ireland became the global hotspot for Fantasy Premier League. Eamon Ryan says Cork versus Kilkenny, the rivalry that defines modern camogie. So that is the decider this weekend. We're going to have Sarah O'Donovan on with us tomorrow morning to do a full preview of that one. The Irish Times this morning then leads with that as well. Phelan and Kilkenny in praising another final challenge, writes Paul Keane. Northsiders have lost several players from the last title success 20 months ago, but are still good enough to be facing Cork at Croke Park, and I think they are favourites according to the bookmakers as well, Kilkenny, to get over the line this weekend. The back page at London Times leads with Ronaldo. His exit is unacceptable, says Ten Hag. I think we've pretty much covered that at this point. John Duggan, good morning to you.
Eoin and Dan, how are you doing?
I can't believe I teed you up without teeing this up. It is virtual insanity time.
You have entered Power Drive.
Another big week for the golf lover in your life, John.
It was frustrating last week. Taylor Pendrith was a 70-1 headline tip, and he was tied for the lead going into the final round in Detroit, the Rocket Mortgage Classic, and he finished tied for second. And the next guy I picked was also tied second, Cameron Young. So it was a missed opportunity at profit for the year again, but that's them's the breaks, as Boris Johnson would say.
How are we looking overall?
833 out of 1,000, so slightly down. But I didn't go into profit until Halloween last year, so.
Okay, that's a few months away.
Yeah, we're you know, it swings around about. It ended up at 46% profit last year, a little bit down this year. So just, you know, if we were all making profit every single year, we would be living in Barbados. Then again, you could have other people doing the tipping slot rather than me. So
shots fired.
You know, I need to get your man's that bowler guy. You always say to me.
Yeah, who do you think you are? I am.
Yeah. I'm waiting for that moment. And hopefully that moment will be sooner rather than later.
Hopefully, John.
So this is the Wyndham Championship, which starts in North Carolina today, 11:50 Irish time. Denny McCarthy, the man with the Irish name, is the headline tip, and a strong fancy for me now this week for Denny McCarthy. Been following him all year. He's much improved. He contended at the US Open. Statistically the best putter on tour for 2 years, 2019, 2020. €8 each way for virtual money at 35 to 1. 5 top 10 finishes this season, including 3 in his last 5 starts. Did miss the cut last week, but not too concerned about that. Puts very well on Bermuda greens. I think the course at Sedgefield suits him this week. He's been never missed a cut there. Tied 15th last year, tied 9th the year before when he was playing inferior golf to the golf he's been playing this year. Denny McCarthy has not won, former Walker Cup player. I think he can break through and win this week. He's a strong fancy as my headline tip this week, each way 35 to 1. The other 3 I put up on otbsports.com and on the app are Christian Bezoudenhout at 40 to 1 for 3 each way. Was second to the John Deere Classic 3 starts ago, has won 3 times on the DP World Tour, has got a beautiful touch around the greens, which is what you need this week. A 64 among his previous round at the Wyndham when he only appeared there once. I think he's a good each way chance. Adam Svensson as well, a 66 to 1 for 3 each way. 5 top 25s in his last 6 starts. The Canadian has won twice in the Corn Ferry Tour last season, so he knows how to get the job done. Had a shot of 61 in this course before. I think he's a guy who could definitely contend. And the rank outsider at 175 to 1 for 250 each way is Vince Whaley, an American friend of Scotty Scheffler's. Was 5th at the Barbasol Championship last month, 17th last week in Detroit. Has shot 2 rounds of 66 here before. Is going to get his tour card for next season. I think he is, of all the outsiders, is the most overpriced outsider is Vince Whaley at 175 to 1. So Vince Whaley, Adam Svensson, Christian Bezoudenhout, but the strong each way headline tip this week, folks, is Denny McCarthy.
Okay, I want to keep an eye on this weekend. That is Virtual Insanity this week.
You have entered Power Drive.
Tommie Gorman is a Tottenham superfan. John Duggan is a Tottenham superfan. And we'll have Clive Allen on the show a little bit later on, John. So this is a Spurs special this morning.
One of my saddest days in sport was the 1987 FA Cup final. I was eating my dinner. I was, 8 years of age. Clive Allen put Spurs in front after 2 minutes. It was that season when he scored 49 goals. Player of the year, 33 goals in the league. And you're thinking, this is going to be our day and we're going to win the FA Cup. And as a formative Spurs fan, only a couple of seasons into my fandom, it was an amazing moment. And then Coventry City beat us 3-2. So it was not really the same after that. Glenn Hoddle left. I remember Ozzy Ardiles played in that game. You know, Chris Waddle at the club at the time. We had a really, really good team. We were 3rd in the league, finished in the semi-finals of the League Cup and lost the FA Cup final. The nearly season under David Pleat. If there was European football back then, I think Spurs would have done well in it. We played a 4-5-1, really exciting team, and Clive Allen was the lone striker. And a brilliant player who was unlucky with injuries. I always think in 84-85 season we could have really contended for the league if he'd been fit. It was, I think, a brilliant goal. Colin Buhig, our producer, was pointing out to me one of the best goals he's ever seen from Clive Allen. So it was for QPR at West Ham in March 1984. And the funny thing about Clive Allen was he went to Arsenal but never made an appearance from Crystal Palace, and then ended up at QPR. Played in the cup final in 1982, but it was Spurs really where he made his name before going to Man City and Bordeaux. But one of my childhood heroes, and look forward to hearing from him soon.
We were having a conversation earlier on in the show off last night's news round about our favourite sounds in sport.
Right.
What's the sound that gets you going the most in sport?
Well, I've been lucky enough a few times, and Dan would know from World Cups and that kind of thing, when a stadium goes to another level, and you very, very rarely hear it in life. And luckily enough, I was lucky enough to hear it at the Olympic final in the Maracanã when Brazil won that on penalties, or lucky enough to hear it when Russia beat Spain at the World Cup. Actually, when Stephen Cluxton hit that point in Croke Park, I would have heard it. You hear just this almost like locusts in your, not that I've heard locusts, but you just hear this absolute deafening crackling sound in your ear, and this like reverberation in your ears, a euphony of sound in a full stadium of 80,000, 100,000 people. And that, to me, is the essence of life. And there's nothing, I don't do Class A's, never have, don't do illegal drugs, but I'm telling you, that the high you get from that, I don't know, Dan, if you've experienced that, I'm sure you have it at games, or Owen yourself. Maybe you did at Kerry when they beat Galway at the very end of the final whistle. But the final whistle sound, that sound of that just pure deafening sound, is definitely the sound I love the most in sports.
What about the sound of people who hear a roar in a stadium after they've left the ground? That must be a sporting sound of some description, where you've gone. What was the game recently where a load of fans stormed out and they couldn't get back in? Was it the Real Madrid Man City game? I can imagine the sound of that sound, as you say, of the stadium going wild after you've walked out early. That must be a painful sound.
Yeah, but there is something kind of glorious about it. If, say, you're going to a doubleheader and you're not very interested in the first game, and you hear it on the way in, like that roar, but from outside the stadium. The cacophony of sound that it produces and shoots out of the stadium is quite nice from outside.
Different countries have a different sound. Like the Scottish fan roar is a different type of roar than you have to other countries. You know, it's guttural is exactly it. I remember the game where Scotland beat Ireland it was played in Parkhead, and just the roar when Scotland scored, it was just a different sound to what I've heard that you would hear in other places. It's definitely like there's a little underrated sort of national element we can all add to that. I don't know what the Irish sound is. Is it just like...
Well, it's probably your groan, is it?
It's the groan when someone passes the ball back into their own half. Yeah, that's honestly what it is.
I would love to... I'd say the Genoa sound was pretty good. The Romania game in 1990, or the Stuttgart sound, I'd say they were pretty amazing sounds. It's just... There is a level of where actually it's actually deafening in your ears, and you have that noise, and like it is like a drug, getting that noise. Another one that's interesting is when the air and the sound have sucked out of a stadium. Like, it's happened to me a few times. Michael Lino was one. You can obviously know that it happened on the TV, but I was there for the Ajax Spurs game when Spurs scored, Lucas Moura, and like the whole stadium, they were about to win. They were absolutely rocking. It was like just pure silence. We had it again, Ireland, New Zealand in 2013 when they scored a late conversion to win the game at the Aviva when we were leading.
Yeah.
When you just have that pure silence. And these are amazing, like the sound of silence.
Yeah, and I think you were in the middle of it, John, but everybody else in the stadium probably would have felt like just this tiny pocket of unbelievable ecstasy, where it's almost like a very loud noise on your TV that you've just turned down to like one volume or something like that.
Pretty much,
just coming out from the corner.
Pretty much.
I think the famous one of that was, I think Ireland were on the verge of qualifying for, I think, the World Cup in 1958. This guy called John Acho got a late equaliser for England. I think it was Philip Green was the RTE commentator and had some line about the sound of silence, you know, in the aftermath.
Wow.
Daily meant just like it was so close, and it was that late goal, and it pricked it, as you say, like the life out of the balloon, or the air out of the balloon or something. And that's actually a famous one in Irish football history. The England goal in 57, which killed it.
Right.
Didn't even know about that. We'll check that out.
Let us know your favourite sounds. We've piggybacked on last night's conversation here very, very effectively. You can tweet us at Off The Ball, or you can comment on the YouTube stream if that's where you're getting us. Just to let you know, we are 9 minutes away from our roadshow tickets going on sale. Off The Ball is going back to Vicar Street in association with Cadbury FC. We've got a massive roadshow coming your way on August the 17th. Michael Owen, Ian Wright, Emma Byrne and Karen Carney were going to be our guests. There should be some great stories in the night as four legends of the game reminisce about their careers and preview the upcoming season. This is an exclusive off-air event, and tickets go on sale, as I say, at 9 o'clock this morning, 8 minutes now, and you'll get the details across all of our social channels. A reminder that ticket proceeds will go towards supporting Irish women's grassroots football. Terms and conditions apply. We'll see you on the night. Right, it is time for the second episode of You Had to Be There.
It was so unexpected.
You had to be there.
Covering Celtic at that time was a brilliant thing. The atmosphere at Parkhead was always great.
You had to be there.
Nobody ever talks about this game. Nobody saw it.
You had to be there.
The gauntlet was very much laid down by Jonathan Wilson last week in episode 1 of this. You can listen to it back in our podcasts. Dan McDonnell is next man up as we go through some of the best live performances a journalist has ever seen, in the flesh, of course. Dan, how challenging was this for you to put this list together?
Pretty challenging, yeah, because you don't want to... Like, I know it was described as like greatest individual performances, but then I did listen to Jonathan's piece last week, and he threw in John Kennedy for Celtic, which was a memorable individual display, but I'm not sure if he's suggesting it was a better performance than, I presume, he's watched Messi in a Classico or something like that. It's the ones that stick with you. And I kind of find it hard because, like, this is the classic sort of, I don't know, journalist sort of coming across like a bit of a prat without meaning to, but you've been to so many games and you've been to a lot of... I'm lucky to have been to the last, I think, 3 World Cups and, quite a few major tournaments, that you sort of start to forget them. You lose. I think the feeling, ones that made you feel like a fan. And the sad thing is, like, you stop feeling that way, I think, because you're often just immersed in your own world. You're actually sort of, you see great things, but it's very much in the context of, but I have a deadline here, and you almost lose some of that magic. Or I have anyway. Maybe other people manage to sort of retain that. So I actually had to really think about it, and to try and think of ones that genuinely I was sort of thinking about it sort of 24 hours later, and I actually had that sort of lasting impact. Rather than sometimes there's ones that they just, like, that was great, but they sort of go into the dustbin of history of your mind, like, pretty quickly. But I also think as well, people move on from sporting events a lot quicker now. They don't linger. There's so much, I don't know, people don't, you move on to the next story. You have these incredible Champions League games in recent years, like Barca, PSG, and all these comebacks, the Liverpool one. But it has to be almost extraordinary to live in the sporting cycle, beyond a week, what I mean? But and
there's possibly a conversation in there around individual moments as well, that maybe in the modern football we've got these super teams as opposed to
that's actually a very good point. The framing here is about singling out players.
Yeah.
There would be nights that I associate with teams rather than individual players, like that. I mean, I mentioned it earlier, like that Dundalk run in 2016 was amazing, but I associate it as a team, so I couldn't pick out one thing from that. But I did sort of pick out a couple of stories which are a little bit more, for me anyway, my team is a little bit more almost seeing people before they were famous, or seeing them as they were about to take off.
I knew them before they were cool.
Well, sort of, yeah. It's like I saw this band in Whelan's, before they sort of took off or something. There's a small bit of that in there. Yeah.
So our first band that you've seen before they became well known is Wes Hoolahan.
Wes Hoolahan. I had to. This was the last one that I included. Like, similar to Jonathan last week, I'm doing it in chronological order. So this is 2004. A game between Shelbourne and Finn Harps, which wouldn't necessarily live long in the memory, only for the fact that this was around the time you're realising, and a lot of people had realised this earlier, but maybe just sometimes you see it in the flesh, you see the hype coming to life, is that this Wes Hoolahan fella is pretty good. And the clip is out there on YouTube if people want to look at Wes Hoolahan, Finn Harps. They'll find this goal that he scored, where he sort of executes this 1-2, and this sort of perfect deft chip that just drops in underneath the crossbar. One of these goals, I still sort of remember it. I still remember sitting in the press box that night, working, watching the game, and just being stirred by it, and just sort of realising that I don't know how many people were in the ground that day. Sort of 1,000, 1,500 people, because Shells even wouldn't have got massive crowds at the time, even though they were pretty good. But you're realising, I wish more people could see how good this guy is. And there's always a part of you with those, the League of Ireland geniuses, of which there are many, and there's been many over the years, like Tony Sheridan and Liam Coyle, and these incredibly talented players who you always fear there's some kink or something that's going to hold them back from getting to the stage that they deserve, that you're looking at this going, this is a special talent that, like, most people, like, everyone tries to play football when they're a kid, and this fella has a talent that's in the 0.001%, and yet you're thinking, I really hope he gets that stage to do it.
Did he get that stage he deserved, do you think? Like, to its
but he
fullest
did eventually.
extent?
Like, Wes still scored it. Like, I mean, that's the thing, why I think a lot of people probably felt the emotion of his goal against Sweden in the Euros in 2016. There was 12 years after. Like, he was quite old at that stage.
Yeah.
Wes played in the League of Ireland not for like 6 months, like a lot of the young players now. Like, what the great thing about the Brexit reality now is that I feel like in 10-15 years time there's going to be a lot more stories that people have like this, because you will see great talents passing through for 6 months. But Wes was here for, I think, 5 years.
What about his club career? Did you think it would take him to an even higher plane than that got to? Because I think the Irish thing is a little bit more nuanced than the talent.
True.
I mean, there's conversations around managers and all that, but if you distill this down to his club career, do you think he reached the level his talent could have got him to?
Yeah, he could have got there earlier, I suppose.
Okay.
And in reflection, the Irish thing is possibly tied in with it. I mean, but the Ireland squad was very good around that time too. I think with Brian Kerr was the manager. like, could he have found room for Wes in some of those squads? But it wasn't as much of a debate and the discussion then. And to be fair, he had a Premier League squad. And like, the thing about Wes is, like, it took him a while. I mean, he went to Livingston and didn't do especially well, and then went to sort of England and worked his way up the levels there, and probably had to get fitter and do, you know, make certain improvements in his sort of lifestyle, which I think he's spoken about in the past, which he did. And so maybe it's not, sometimes it's like it's football's fault that Wes didn't get to where he was, but maybe he himself could have addressed some things a little bit earlier and got to the top of the mountain a little bit earlier. But I think there was possibly always a certain joy that a lot of people here took from Wes eventually doing his thing in the Premier League and being part of like a big landmark moment, like an Irish goal at a major tournament, because I mean, over a decade earlier, they were saying someone has to realise how good he is.
Yeah.
You know, how good this guy is.
Next up is an international game between Croatia and Germany in 2008.
Yeah, so this is Euro 2008, and like this is the first tournament I went to, the first major tournament I went to, and there's always maybe there's a personalised element to that you're particularly nostalgic for that, because it was like, this is great, like I'm at a major football tournament here. And it was the summer that Modric had just joined Spurs. So this classic thing where you will have in a major tournament, we all do it, it'll happen later this year, there'll be some smaller nation playing and some exciting young player on the team who's, there's loads of Premier League interest in him, or he's on his way to the Premier League, and you'll watch them with a little bit more interest. But this was in a place called Klagenfurt, and it was one of these grounds which is rare. A lot of the major tournaments, you're up at a perch like the Aviva, like you're looking at this stadium like a sort of a Subbuteo pitch down below you. But this is one like White Hart Lane, the old White Hart Lane, and a few places where you're right at pitch level, like sort of, you know, 3-4 seats from the front. You know, so you're watching the game with the perfect sort of ringside sort of seat. And Croatia beat Germany, and Modric was sensational, and it was just so obvious and as clear as day that this guy is a world-class operator. And again, and it maybe, like, there's a bit of that with my list with some, it wasn't like one particular moment, it was more just that sustained quality across the game, this control, this sort of degree of sort of just slowly, you know, you appreciate more maybe when you're there, just the little runs, the little passes, that he was sort of controlling everything. He was controlling the pitch. Everything was on a string, and he was sort of he was holding it. And again, just one of these moments where you're thinking, even at this level, this fella can go so much further in where he can do. And maybe like I've seen performances from people and they've dropped off a cliff, like, you know, 2 years later, and that's it. And maybe it's grown in my mind, it's become even a bigger game or a bigger moment because he's gone on to be like a sort of a phenomenon. Like, and it wasn't just hype, he was the real deal. But yeah, that's a memory that will always stick in my mind, that one.
Class. So that's Modric in the group stages of Euro 08 against Germany. The next one is relatively niche.
Yeah, I needed something niche in there. I definitely did. Like the League of Ireland European Games, I mean, it's very topical because we're talking about a round of them today. And this is Shamrock Rovers Partizan Belgrade in 2011. This is the second leg of the playoff tie. Rovers had drawn the game 1-1 in Dublin. Gary McCabe, Katie McCabe's brother, got a late equaliser. And going over there, like, you know, there was only 4 Irish journalists went, and in reality it was sort of the Lions Den stuff, and you're selling it thinking, yeah, I think they have a chance of getting through, but probably deep down you're thinking, I mean, this is very unlikely to happen. And one of the things about that Shamrock Rovers team is that they probably struggled in the goalkeeping department that year. So Ryan Thompson is a Jamaican goalkeeper who wouldn't have had a reputation of, well, this is a top keeper in the league. He would have had some good days and he would have had some bad days. You know, he would have had some ropey days. And you're sort of looking at him going to Belgrade, one of the best atmospheres I've ever been in, the Partizan Stadium. They're expecting this to be a night where they qualify for the group stages of the Europa League. And I think it was around 5 or 6 minutes into the game, he's taken a kick out and he pretty much kicks it straight to the Partizan striker. This classic sort of gaff.
Right.
Where you're thinking, oh no, like this is a horror show. This is the nightmare coming true. Like he's going to struggle here. And he actually managed to save the shot that came straight back at him. And it was one of these moments where you're thinking, I kind of wonder, could this night be something a little bit different? And it sort of went from there. That although Partizan went 1-0 up, Thompson just starts to make some really good saves. He's having one of these nights. Again, there's a clip that's out there of him, like one incredible reaction save where the ball comes into the box, ricochets off a Partizan player, and he somehow, that classic one that the goalkeepers do, the change of direction, the quick feet, and he sends out a hand and he pushes it round the post. And it just, like, it was one of those nights then Patrick Sullivan scored an incredible 30-yard volley, and Shamrock Rovers go on to win 2-1 after extra time, the first Irish club to ever qualify for the group stages of a competition in this like heaving stadium in Belgrade, where there's like they're booing their players, they're slaughtering their players, but they give a massive round of applause and ovation to the Shamrock Rovers players coming off the pitch, because they knew like this was a sort of a pretty small club having a pretty big moment. I think there was like 35 Shamrock Rovers fans there. There was big security concerns about how they would be treated. I remember even arriving in Belgrade, and everyone who arrived at Belgrade, we were taken into an office, and there was a security guard there and a local police guy there who gave us all individual instructions on how to conduct yourself while in Belgrade for this trip.
Wow.
But I think they thought that there was going to be like all this trouble or this edge or something.
And that didn't materialise.
That didn't materialise. And like the Partizan were, I mean, it was a pretty intense, angry place, but more so directed at their own players.
Okay.
But in the midst of it, you have this goalkeeper who possibly would have been described as, you know, a ropey one, just having one of the nights of his life, gets away with that early mistake. And as the game goes on, he gets better, doesn't concede another. And they go into the group stages and they're playing Spurs and all of that. And he leaves the club, I think at the end of that season. He's gone and he's played around the world in sort of various places, but he'll always have Belgrade.
He'll always have a place on Dan McDonnell's list as well. Which
well,
is
that's the key list
thing.
where he wants to be in.
I've got a couple more to go here. Two more high profile names, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, so Jack Grealish. So we have Jack Grealish, who, I mean, we've heard of him. Yeah, he's a little known player called Jack Grealish, who is always good to have an ex-Irish under-21 international in the list. But this one, again, it's Sheffield United and Aston Villa, January 2018, where I'd actually gone to Sheffield to interview Enda Stevens, or to do a piece with Enda Stevens after this match. And the classic thing of the journalist thing, if you pop along to a game in the UK to try and watch an Irish player, and you have sort of a loose arrangement to speak to them after the game, you hope that nothing bad happens to them during the match that like changes things. I remember I went over to Chris Forrester when he signed for Peterborough, and he missed a penalty in the 92nd minute of the game, and I'm like, you have to hover around and meet him afterwards. It wasn't great. But Enda Stevens makes a mistake in the last minute of this game, and I just decided to leave him be. They lose 1-0. But the real takeaway from the night for me was Grealish, because you remember that little period after Grealish defected, where he went off the rails a small bit, and there was this sense of Villa went down, and people thought, well,
we've dodged a bullet there.
We don't miss this Grealish guy. You know, I think even around the time of even Euro, I'm trying to think what term was it, Euro 2016, or there was definitely a sense where he was on the downgrade. But this was probably the night that sticks in me, where I was just like, oh no, like this guy is brilliant.
Yeah,
like he became this boo boy figure in the Championship. Like for whatever reason, just because of Grealish, he had a bit of presence, a bit of swagger. I didn't realise that he was being sort of booed for no particular reason by Sheffield United fans that night, in the same way like James McLean would get booed in stadiums just because he's a sort of a figure that annoyed them. He kept getting kicked. He just kept getting up. He kept looking for the ball. Kept taking the ball, he would get fouled. And I know he can be frustrating, Grealish, and where he's going to go to now. And then maybe with Villa, he was trying to do everything, which was both a good thing and a bad thing. But I have to admit that you're just watching this game in the same way you're maybe talking about Modric or something, thinking, yeah, this guy's actually probably going to go pretty far in the game. And yeah, it's just one that sort of, I was trying to include something from sort of games in England that I've been to. And that was definitely one that sort of came to mind, that you're watching someone in the Championship, you realise he's going through a character building process right in front of your eyes, and he's good enough to come out the other end. And they didn't even get promoted that season, Villa. It was the next season they got up to the playoffs. But it wasn't a huge surprise to me then that sort of Grealish went on to be whatever, £100 million player.
Yeah, no, for sure. Your last one, I think most people will remember this on television anyway.
Yeah, so I got lucky in the World Cup in 2018 that I was in Kazan, and I think Jonathan actually spoke about this last week as well, that these World Cups, like the distances are vast, and you sort of gamble on knockout games. You have to book them before you know who's in them, and so it could work out great or it could work out badly. You could think you're going to be preparing for a heavyweight clash and end up with like 2 low profile teams, but because Argentina came in the back door to the round of 16, I ended up in Kazan for France-Argentina, which was possibly the game of that tournament. You know, like it was just, and to be in the stadium for it was an experience as it was, but Kylian Mbappe in that game was one of those moments, almost like a sporting sound that we're talking about across the show. There was this moment in the game where it was like a long 60-yard pass played over the top, and the acceleration he showed, the sort of lap, I can't even remember who the Argentine defender was, that he effectively sort of lapped him to get to the ball, and there was this sort of intake of breath from the audience. Would have been quite a few neutrals at these games, and you're just realising, again, this is an extraordinarily sort of freakish talent. Like you're already watching elite football, and everyone on that pitch is brilliant by a certain measure. But there are obviously some people who just are that little grade up, you know. And maybe, I don't know, like Mbappe hasn't gone on to be the absolute phenomenon that maybe I possibly thought coming home that he was going to be, you know, straight away, that he would get to that sort of Messi, Ronaldo discussion level. He's not there now, right? Like he's if you were to list like the top 3 footballers in the world, some people wouldn't have him in it, I think, you know.
Yeah, has the PSG thing held him back in that regard?
Probably has. No, it probably has, and like various stories maybe about his, I don't know, like how's he perceived, and there's maybe people around him that maybe aren't great influences, and all these stories that we've seen a million times. But this was him with everything to prove to the world. Like this is like, and maybe that's the team here, that a lot of these guys, like, where it was before they'd really got to the top level, so they have that drive. Like we spoke about Aaron Connolly earlier. Like when guys are on the way up, sometimes they actually peak then. They never actually,
correct,
you know, that actually is their peak. You just don't realise you're seeing it at the time, and like,
and they definitely don't realise.
No, and maybe Mbappe in that World Cup like may end up being the highlight of his career.
It might well be, especially when you look at the Euros last time, missing that penalty, and like the not the damaging effect that has, but it kind of felt at that moment that it was like, oh, there's actually kind of like a negative chapter to this guy's career, where you thought everything was going to be so perfect that it was just a reminder that actually these guys are mortal. Yeah, and it sticks out more. Like I've seen Messi play and Ronaldo play, but they were sort of established figures, and so it was amazing to watch them and a great pleasure to watch them. But there's something about sort of seeing someone who's on the way there, and like that was such a sensational game. But just his contribution to it, even if he didn't score the best goal, you know, and Pavard's the flight of the shot was just stunning, you know. But it was possibly one thing you're thinking, I'm going to be telling people in many years to come. 100%. I saw Mbappe play in that game. He was absolutely sensational that day. Dan, an excellent list, I must say. Fair play to you. Yeah, that is this week's You Had to Be There.
It was so unexpected.
You had to be there.
Covering Celtic at that time was a brilliant thing. The atmosphere at Parkhead was always great.
You had to be there.
Nobody ever talks about this game. Nobody saw it.
You had to be there.
Yeah, 12 minutes past 9. OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Here's what we've got on OTB Sports Radio today. From 1 o'clock is OTB Gold with Jack McCaffrey. Leaders' questions coming your way at 3 o'clock, and then a retro panel on Meath GAA's heyday at 4 o'clock. There's another helping of OTB Gold coming your way then at 6, which is an interview with Paul McGrath. And then Off the Ball is live at 7 o'clock with Richie McCormick in the hot seat. You can follow Off the Ball across all of our social channels. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can download the OTB Sports app for the latest and best in sports content and analysis. After this break, we're live with the former England forward and Tottenham Hotspur coach Clive Allen on the eve of the 22-23 Premier League season. Back in a few.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
OTB Sports, in association with Cabri FC, are returning with a monster football roadshow coming your way August 17th.
Football legends, Michael Owen.
If you haven't got that attitude, then you'll never survive.
Ian Wright.
Lots to look forward to.
Emma Byrne.
That's normal, that's all in the game. Level is gone through the roof.
And Karen Carney will be our guests at Vicar Street
as they look back on their playing days and preview the new 2022-2023 season.
This is an exclusive off-air event and tickets are limited, so don't delay. Go to otbsports.com/events.
And remember that the ticket proceeds will go towards supporting Irish women's grassroots football.
T's and C's apply. See you on the night.
Things that put people off on a first date. Showing up late and getting your name wrong? Always a great start. Looking at their phone more than you? Hello? Someone who only talks about themselves. Oh, really? God, aren't you great? Look, no one said dating is perfect, but at GoDating.ie, we promise we'll always try and find your perfect match. Because somewhere out there, there's someone for you. And GoDating.ie will help you find them. Yes, even you, socks and sandals guy. Go on, go for it with GoDating.ie.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
14 minutes past 9, you're very welcome back to OTB AM. Delighted to welcome Clive Allen to the show to look ahead to the new Premier League season. Clive, how are you getting on?
I'm good, thank you. Good morning.
We've had a couple of Tottenham Hotspur fans on the show already this morning. They were reminiscing in your glory days as a forward, a goal-scoring forward. Could I just ask, first off, Clive, if you were playing in the modern game, how do you think you would fare, just given the way goal-scoring has become shared so much between a front two, a front three quite often?
Well, I do think the art of the goal scorer is dying in respect, as you say, of sharing the goals around. Perhaps Harry Kane, a prime example of that. Fantastic goal scorer, but will develop play deeper down the field. So I think that's just part and parcel of the modern game. I would just like to think I'd be in the right place at the right time and continue to score goals, which is what win games in the end.
It's going to be a really interesting case study this season, isn't it, with regards to Erling Haaland, where possibly the most high-profile signing of the entire summer window is a centre forward in the more traditional mould. And what we expect Erling Haaland to do is to score goals, and lots of them. It is a little bit of a throwback, isn't it?
I believe it is, and I think that it was if there was something missing from Manchester City, hence their interest in Harry Kane last summer. Adding Haaland this summer, I think, is a magnificent coup. Just 22 years of age, he is the atypical centre forward, scores goals, will give Manchester City a new dimension this year. It just might take time for them to adjust to the way he plays, and obviously the way that they played and won the Premier League last year.
What sort of adjustments does he need to make? Because it seemed if we're getting carried away on the Community Shield, there might be a little bit of a bedding in process.
Yeah, I think he's going to have to be patient, because I think sometimes he will expect the delivery of the ball and it might not come because of the way City dominate possession, especially in the midfield area. But I think if he keeps making those runs with the quality that they have within that City midfield, De Bruyne in particular, they will start to find him, pick his runs. We saw that with Grealish providing for him in the winning goal he scored against Bayern Munich in the recent pre-season game. So it's going to take time to develop, but there's no doubt that I think he'll be a big star for Man City.
He does have all the attributes to succeed in the Premier League, it seems. Is there anything at all about him that would concern you in terms of how quickly he might get up to speed?
Well, I think it will be that he needs to be patient. Okay. He needs to understand that it will take a little time. But I think that he seems to have an old head on young shoulders. And he'll adapt. He looks very, very determined and excited about joining City. And I think it will pay dividends over the course of the season.
We've asked you before coming on air to pick your top four and your bottom three. So what we might do, Clive, is just get your top four first and go through them. So who are you looking at this season as number 1 to number 4?
Well, I think a lot of people will agree. City, for me, will win it again. And I think that the addition of Haaland is a good one. It's made them even stronger, which was difficult to do. I think Liverpool looked fantastic, especially last weekend. It looks as if they're going to hit the ground running. They will run City very, very close. I think that the addition of Núñez, their front line, obviously, it's a work in progress at Liverpool in that Klopp seems to be able to change players around but still get the right results. I think, Van Dijk back in regularly at the heart of the defence has made them rock solid defensively. We know they can score goals. So I see Liverpool running Man City very close again. I think from then on down, it's very, very interesting because of the way things are unfolding. I think Spurs have done fantastic business in the summer, and they've done it early, which is unusual for them. I think that Conte's stamped his mark on the team. The way they finished last season was really impressive. Qualified for the Champions League. To take that on, he needed addition in players, strengthen the squad, which they've done. So I'm going to go Spurs third and Chelsea fourth. I think Chelsea, again, in a little bit of turmoil because of the changes, not necessarily with the team, but certainly behind the scenes with the ownership, etc. But I think that Tuchel has had to make some signings because of losing perhaps a whole defensive line. So Koulibaly coming in is going to be a really interesting one to watch as to how he adapts to Premier League football. Fantastic defender, but he will find it difficult, I believe. And Chelsea, again, because of the addition, Raheem Sterling arriving, the changes that they've made, it will take them a little while, I think, to reassemble their authority that they had last season. So I'm going for Chelsea fourth.
Is there a chance that Tottenham actually push on and give Liverpool and Manchester City cause to look over their shoulder this season?
Well, I think they've got some strength in depth now, and I think that will be advantageous as the season unfolds. Obviously, they're going to be in the Champions League, which was definitely the goal. The end of last season was finishing fourth, qualified for the Champions League. So that brings its demands, and it is a squad that is just come together in terms of the numbers. It's going to be fascinating how Conte juggles that squad, interchanges the players. I think that he's added really well in the departments that needed strengthening. So, I think if Spurs get off to a good start and carry the confidence they had from the end of last season into this, they could well be closer than any teams to City and Liverpool.
It does feel that there's genuine optimism around the club that the success that they saw at the end of last season could be sustainable in the long term. I guess the one caveat to that is the man who's brought that sustainable looking level of success is Antonio Conte, who is very rarely attached with the idea of sustainability. His entire track record suggests a short-term fix.
Well, that's right. He demands success. He wants success, and if he doesn't get it, he leaves what he's done. He's quite happy to move on, and I think we've seen that with the jobs he's had, with the success he's achieved. He goes about it in his own style. He's certainly not changed that approach in the way that what he's brought to Spurs. So, again, time will tell, but I do think that certainly the direction is going perfectly for Spurs at the moment. Their intention was to bring him in to qualify for Champions League. That was achieved. So the next step is now in front of them.
So, Clive, you're looking at Spurs as the top team in London this year, and you have Chelsea next. Do you see Arsenal being far off this year? Because there seems to be optimism around maybe some of their pre-season recruitment that they might be closer. Like in your eyes, do you think that's feasible?
Yes, I do. I think it is. I think that they were in pole position last season to qualify for Champions League, and I think maybe just the age of the squad come to bear at the end, where there was a big game, a massive game at Spurs, which they lost, and from there they never really recovered. I think the additions of Zinchenko and Jesus, obviously coming from City, they know how to win. They know what it took to win, and they will bring that to this Arsenal squad. I think it's a talented squad. Again, I think Arteta's got a difficult job in the way that he manages that squad this season. The expectation will certainly be that they could be contenders for the top four. I would have them chasing Chelsea close in fifth.
What's your opinion on Gabriel Jesus?
I think he needed the move, if I'm perfectly honest. I think that at City, it just seemed to me that he had to have 3 or 4 chances to score the one goal. And I just think perhaps now, where he becomes number one or the number one striker at Arsenal, that he can relax a little bit in front of goal. Arsenal will create chances, will give him opportunities. And I can see him flourishing for Arsenal. I think it's a good move for him. and certainly a good acquisition for Arsenal.
It's always interesting, Clive, before we talk to you about which club we focus on. With Arsenal, and when we ask you about Arsenal, what sort of memories does that evoke for you? Is it a sort of strange thing to kind of be attached to the club still, given how it all went for you, or how do you feel about your time at Arsenal?
Well, I was 18. It was an incredible period of my career. Obviously, I was very young. First £1 million transfer for a teenager, that weighed heavily on my shoulders. And I lasted just 63 days. I played for Arsenal for 63 days, 2.5 pre-season friendlies, so not really a competitive game. I always said I grew up in that summer of 1980 very, very quickly. And I have to say, it set me on my way. It was bizarre. Looking back on it now, people say, what happened? And it was quite incredible. But no, Arsenal have been very, very successful. Obviously, under Arsene Wenger, quite invincible at times, and their football was magnificent. Historic football club, fantastic football club, and I'm proud to say that I actually was an Arsenal player very briefly.
Why did they get rid of you?
It was a case of supply and demand, really. Sammy Nelson, the left back, picked up a bad knee injury in pre-season. They needed a left back. Kenny Sansom was the man that they wanted. The only way that deal could be done was that if they traded me, Terry Venables wanted me to go to Palace, and that was the only way he would let Kenny Sansom go. So, it was quite crazy, but obviously it's all history now.
I'm not an economist, but I would assume getting rid of a £1 million teenager after such a short period of time isn't exactly great business.
I think they would say Kenny was a magnificent servant for Arsenal, brilliant left back over the years, and they felt that was their priority.
It didn't work out too badly for you in the long run. If we were to pick a point where your career peaked, Clive, are we talking 86, 87, the 49 goals? I mean, statistically it sticks out off your stat sheet so brilliantly. Is that what felt like your best football as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a magnificent team. When you're playing with the likes of Ozzy Ardiles, Glenn Hoddle, Chris Waddle, my cousin Paul was there. We played in a style that certainly suited me. People said, "Oh, you played up front on your own." That was never really the case because of the quality of the players, the interplay, the movement that we had. Without a doubt, that was the best period of my career. Magnificent season. One that I'd probably be remembered for. 49 goals in the season's not bad.
Absolutely not. For people who didn't see much of that team, can you talk to us a little bit about how yourself, Hoddle and Waddle all played together?
Yeah, it was very interesting. David Pleat came up with the idea with the players that we had at our disposal, and basically it was a 5-man midfield which no one had ever deployed before, and it meant that Glenn was the free player. The way that we passed the ball, short into passing, Glenn became a free player. We overloaded midfield, and teams just didn't know how to deal with it. Traditional 4-4-2 opponents, they found that we just kept the ball. We certainly passed the ball well with the ability that they had. And when you've got, Chris Waddle's ability off the flank, Glenn Hoddle's passing, Ozzy Ardiles, my cousin Paul off the right, I got chance after chance playing in that way, and teams found it very difficult to combat what we were doing.
Yeah, and you went to France then, which is sort of I suppose we're so used now to the Premier League is the hub for everywhere. The power of the Premier League, it's everyone from around the world is sort of, it seems like that's their intended destination. But it would surprise people now that there was actually an exodus from English football in that period of time. That it wasn't just you. There was a sort of a spate of really high profile English players or English based players who went abroad at that point.
Yeah, that's right. I think just following me, Glenn Hoddle, Mark Haitley went to Monaco, Mo Johnson went to play at Nantes. There was players who were playing in Italy, Germany, and it was something that I think it was pretty new at the time because some of the Italian football probably was the most powerful at that particular time. So that was a destination for the best players in the world. French football was very interesting, multinational. Lots of there was players from all over the world playing in French football, and I was given the opportunity. I went out of contract at Spurs and was given the opportunity. I was 28 And I'd always had that ambition to play abroad at some stage in my career, and I had to do it then. That was the position I was in. And I went to Bordeaux. Bordeaux were a very powerful side in French football at that time, and a magnificent experience. I sit here today and I've always said I wouldn't have wanted to sit and regret that I didn't take that opportunity at that stage of my career.
How much success did you have that season in Bordeaux?
I finished top scorer for Bordeaux. We went to the quarterfinals of the UEFA Cup, lost to Diego Maradona's Napoli, who went on to win it. We finished third in the league, which was disappointing for Bordeaux. We had a disastrous cup exit third round against Beauvais, who were a third division side. So that was very disappointing. But played with Jean Tigana, a magnificent captain. Enzo Schifo, Belgium midfield player, who's a wonderful technician. And the infamous Eric Cantona as well. The last 3 months of my time at Bordeaux, Eric came and played, and I played with Eric when he was very young, enfant terrible, but an unbelievable talent.
Did you know how good he was going to be?
I would say no at that time, but you could see that he had a real presence about him, confidence, undoubted ability. And obviously it wasn't until a number of years later that he turned up at Leeds and then Manchester United that, I think Eric fulfilled all the potential that they thought that he had.
Did he wear the collars up in the Bordeaux shirt?
He certainly did. He
Nice.
certainly did, yeah. He wasn't shy, was Eric?
So, am I right in saying that you would have played at the San Paolo with Maradona in the side? What was that experience like?
Well, quite incredible. That was a Napoli team that basically Maradona picked up by the coattails and took them to the Scudetto, the UEFA Cup, and he was extraordinary. I had the pleasure of playing with him at Spurs in Ozzy's testimonial a few years later, and he was the best player in the world at the time, and him and Glenn Hoddle were just on another level when they played together that night. So, it was very, very fortunate to have played on the same field as Diego, played against him and played with him. Was it just electric when he got the ball in front of those Napoli fans? Yeah, it was just sensational. Just everything that he did, it was so natural, it was so easy for him. He was so quick, technically a player that I'd never come up against or never seen before. It was quite extraordinary. Like it does sound like one of the more fascinating periods of your career, Clive, even though everybody remembers, the 49-goal season for Tottenham. And I wonder if you're talking to any young footballers at the moment in England, I presume you'd advise a lot of them to go and experience other leagues if they ever get the opportunity. It's just the problem is you can sometimes be a victim of your own success, where the Premier League has all the money right now and you'll rarely get that opportunity if you're any good. Yeah, that's right. I think, I certainly enjoyed that experience. I was glad that I went through it. I now cover, obviously, French football for BT now. And it's something that, I have an understanding and feeling for, having experienced it. But I think for any young player, especially if they perhaps don't make the progression that they hope to earlier on in their career, to give them the opportunity to go and experience foreign country, a different style of football, I think that just develops them, not only as footballers, but as people as well. And I think that you would find that a lot of players will flourish if they took that opportunity, if it was presented to them.
Because just looking, Clive, I mean, it is 30 years this year since the Premier League, since the transition to sort of the Premier League era. I was looking, you played with West Ham, who got promoted that season. You're sort of in the second tier. I'm just wondering, did you have a sense then of how the Premier League was going to explode? Because I've been looking at it the last week. You would look at a lot of the games, and of the 22 players on the pitch, you might have 22 English players or Scottish players or players from this part of the world. Was there any sense then at that time that the game was about to change so dramatically in England?
No, I don't think there was. I think that it was obviously a progression. It was a new era, but I don't think anybody had the real inclination or belief that it could become what it is today. It is the toughest league in the world. I think the globally now you can go anywhere in the world and they love the Premier League. They love the competition. They love the way that it entertains. It never ceases to amaze into what it produces. and it's grown to something that's quite extraordinary. I did play in the Premier League, 5 Premier League games right at the very start. And I'm proud to say that I did, because, the Premier League is the best league in the world, and it will attract the best players. And I think that really is why it is so special.
Just one last thing before we let you go, Clive. We also asked you for who you think are going to get relegated from the Premier League this season. So who are your bottom 3, do you think?
Well, this was a tough one, because I think, that for me, there's a big divide in the Premier League. I think we can look at, the potential top 10 teams, and I think we'll pretty much get all of those. I think, and then there's 10 in the bottom half that are going to be scrapping for a lot of the season. I think it's going to be very close, a close run thing. For me, I think Bournemouth are going to finish bottom. They're going to struggle. I know Scotty Parker worked with him at Spurs, did a great job to get Bournemouth up, but I think they're going to find it very difficult. And I'm looking at what I saw last season. Brentford, for me, I saw them play at Spurs towards the end of last season, thought they were very disappointing. It is going to be their second season in the Premier League. I think that clubs are going to be far more aware of what they do, how they do it. Losing Eriksen, I think it could be a massive blow to them in terms of how their season unfolds. So I'm going Brentford second bottom. And for me, Southampton. I thought Southampton had a really awful finish to last season. They need to get up and running quickly, because if not, I think it's going to be a very difficult season for Southampton. And I'm going for Southampton to go as the third team.
Okay, very good. Clive, it's been a pleasure chatting to you. Thanks so much for coming on the show this morning.
Absolute pleasure, thank you.
Cheers. That's Clive Allen there on the line. Big reaction to that, and a big reaction earlier on before we let you go to our Sound of Sport comments. Shifty Lad has been in touch to say the sound of the roar on Tuesday, first race in Cheltenham, and the sound when the commentator says the favourite is moving to the front coming down the hill in Cheltenham.
That is that down the hill at Cheltenham when a fancied horse moves into contention. There is that, yeah.
And John Claffey says a long pot and snooker, which doesn't sound bad at all. Right, OTB AM has been brought to you this morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. We're back tomorrow morning from 7:30, where myself and Aisling are going to look ahead to the All-Ireland Senior Camogie final between Cork and Kilkenny on Sunday. We'll have the return of the crappy quiz and much more besides as well. Right now, though, we're leaving you with football journalist John Brewin speaking ahead of the start of the new Premier League season. Enjoy and see you tomorrow.
Hey, Mr. John Brewin is with us. Excited, thrilled, overjoyed to have the Premier League behemoth back in your world, John. How you doing? Great to have you with us.
I'm good. I thought you were referring to me as the Premier League behemoth there, but no. Good to talk to you, Joe, after all this time.
All this time, indeed. It comes around more quickly and more quickly the older we get. So, in some respects, much has changed, and in other respects, it does feel as if we're very much in for. And this happens sometimes, and other times they're changing of guards. This feels like we're in for a continuation of last season and maybe the season before, to an extent, whereby we have Man City against Liverpool looking very much like they're better than the rest, and it will go down to the wire, give or take again, and it's more of the same, and off we go.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. The only thing to say about that is that during that rivalry, which I suppose has gone on for the last 4 or 5 seasons, both those clubs have suffered at least one blip, haven't they, where they've completely dropped off and allowed the other one to steal in and run away with the title. And I suppose if we're looking ahead to the season, which one of those is more likely to have the blip? I personally think... And, OK, we're going to judge this off the Community Shield, always a bad idea. But Liverpool looked a bit more ready for the season than Manchester City in Leicester last week. And I think what you've got... actually, the thing that I've been thinking about these two clubs is they've both signed big strikers. And I mean big strikers. Obviously, the sight of Haaland lumbering around at Leicester, I wasn't ready for that. Now, I've seen Haaland play, but the sight of him in a Manchester City shirt with other City players playing their usual, that flowing football, the interchange that they do, and then this big guy up front who looked to me a bit like, remember when Stuart Pearce let David James loose as a goalkeeper, as a play up front? It reminded me of that. Now, obviously, this is Erling Haaland, one of the world's finest young athletes, and it looked to me as though that would take a while. And then, of course, you've got Nunez. a style of player that Liverpool haven't had for quite a while, you'd say. The galloping striker, probably the last of his kind. I mean, they signed Andy Carroll. We can't really count him as much of a Liverpool player, but Fernando Torres maybe would be in that mould. So we're going back quite a way. One thing is, though, that they did play the false nine before with Roberto Firmino, who's been an excellent player for them. Obviously, he's possibly going to be phased out, or almost certainly being phased out over the years. Jurgen Klopp's a manager that's used to working with centre forwards. He worked with Lewandowski back at Dortmund. So Liverpool, more direct, seems to be more suited to this big man striker. Now, I'm one of the game's purists. I like the idea of getting it launched to the big man. And I'm looking forward to seeing those two strikers, to see the comparison and to see the change in focus, because it almost feels like in signing those two players, the game's two best managers have almost regressed to the mean of English football, which is the centre forward. And it seems like the 90s since we were talking about big centre forwards, the Shearer, Ferdinand, Dion Dublin, now Quinn era. I'm all for this. Is this what we're seeing? I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either. I do feel the discussion around Haaland this week, and to be fair, you're making points that many brilliant observers of the game have made. Jonathan Wilson was on last night, and he was writing about how Haaland seemed to be playing a different game to his teammates. I do feel there is a degree of silly season about this, and a degree of reading way too much into the Community Shield. Sometimes the simplest explanation is true. Haaland has scored 115 goals in 117 games post his career in Norway. He's going to score a gazillion goals for Manchester City. They're going to fit each other just fine. There's too much talent there. There might be a brief adjustment phase, but I mean brief. Even if he doesn't score in the next couple of weeks and takes a bit of time, I mean, if I gave you the over-under, all competitions, is Haaland going to break 30 goals this year with Man City?
I'm going to go for the under, but maybe not so far under, really.
So you do think definite growing pains?
Yeah, I think so. Now, this was put to me by a friend of mine this afternoon. I think this is quite a good point, is that we've seen this with Pep Guardiola over the years. It's almost like he sets himself a puzzle to work out how to make things different. And Haaland is this season's puzzle, like his Wordle almost. How can a player like Haaland, who is completely not a Guardiola type of player, how can he make him work in his team? Now, I'm sure Jonathan and several others have made a comparison to Zlatan Ibrahimovic, but it's going back 10 years. Yeah. Pep's evolved as a manager since then. His teams don't play exactly the same football as they did back then. But is this some sort of rosebud thing where it's like, I couldn't make it work with Ibrahimovic, but I'm going to make it work with Haaland and prove that I can play different styles of football than the tiki-taka, tippy-tappy thing that other people criticise me for over the years. People criticising it's the best teams of all time, but there you go. But yeah, there will be growing pains, and when players sign for Manchester City, they have to fit into that system. There's been growing pains throughout that time, really. Jack Grealish is on his second season. You couldn't say that last season was the type of season that he would have hoped for. He made a contribution, but not nearly as much. You've got Riyad Mahrez, who perhaps in his first season didn't really make any sort of impact. When you consider that Mahrez was the best player in Leicester's team that had won the title, it takes a while under Guardiola. And Haaland, for all his talent, is not going to be immune to that, is he? There is going to be the growing pains, the phrase you used, and it being Manchester City, there's a plan B, there's a plan C, and that there are other players that can play in the forward line that have delivered for them in the years that Pep Guardiola's been at the club. So I don't think Guardiola's going to be too worried if Haaland doesn't work out. But fitting him into a team, assimilating him into a team, when you've got Liverpool who perhaps look a bit more ready-made, charging up the table, that might present a problem for them.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'd be amazed if there's problems here. I think he's just going to revel in this, to be honest, Haaland, and very quickly they'll figure each other out. You mentioned Grealish. His interviews post-season or in the immediate aftermath of the season last year were celebrated for being so forthright and honest, and they were brilliant. You know, I think everybody warmed to Jack Grealish, actually, the way he was talking about how difficult he found playing at Man City. And in effect, it boiled down to Grealish saying, I just couldn't be myself, and possession was king. And it was only really in one or two games where he said he got a good early touch or an early goal, and he kind of thought, right, I feel like me again. You know, he used that phrase, I felt like me again. And he talked about as well, just always been acutely aware of Guardiola's presence at training, like this intimidation and this kind of a person to be impressed, and it must be very difficult to be a player like Grealish who's never had to worry about these things, to suddenly being almost self-conscious. That was what Grealish really was talking about. He was probably self-conscious for the first time on a football pitch, having come through this first season and then almost, you know, voiced these kind of issues and maybe addressed them. Maybe, I mean, you'd love to know if Guardiola sat him down and said, well, that was really interesting, I didn't know you felt that way, or let's see how we can map this out. Grealish to blossom in season 2 under Guardiola like so many do, or do we think there's just an incompatibility there between Grealish and what he wants to do with the football and what Guardiola wants?
It's an interesting point you raise, isn't it? I mean, I think when Jack Grealish talked about that, it reminded me of the way that someone joins the military and essentially they break down your character and rebuild you. And that's the way you have to be for Pep Guardiola. Now, Jack Grealish doesn't really seem the military type, does he? You know, he's more a maverick Tom Cruise type of guy, I suppose. Now, listen, he's a hugely talented player.
Yeah.
But having said that, one of Grealish's problems, I think, is that he's in a team in which there are players who are far more talented than him. So, being yourself, okay, you could be yourself in Aston Villa, where you are the best player, you are the hometown king. But is Jack Grealish a more talented player than Phil Foden? I'm going to say no. Is he more talented than Kevin De Bruyne? Well, let's not be silly here. And Bernardo Silva. So you've got that group of players in which you're not first among equals. You're not among equals. You're almost like fourth in the group. They had Raheem Sterling, of course, last season, and he's moved on, which actually opens a space up for Jack Grealish, though, of course. And Gabriel Jesus has moved on as well. So Grealish has moved up the reckoning because players have moved on, though Haaland has also come in. He'll be given the stage to do it, but I think from his point of view, his talent, such as it is, and his focus as well, has to step up as well. That's the point of working for Guardiola. He breaks you down to become a better player, and you have to respond to that. And I think Grealish's honesty was appreciated, though I do wonder how appreciated it might be by Guardiola himself.
Because I thought there was a very fair argument that Guardiola really damaged Grealish last season.
Yeah.
And didn't nurse him through the growing pains. Like, I do think Guardiola does have this standoffish quality to his character, and Grealish was obviously bereft of confidence. And where it really hit me that he had not ruined Grealish as a player, but really taken away something intrinsic, was at the Bernabeu when Grealish came off the bench against Madrid on that, you know, infamous night where City once again bowed out of the Champions League. And for the last maybe 10, 15 minutes, normal time and then into extra time, the real avenue for Man City, if they wanted to take it, was Grealish against Carvalhal.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And there were times where Grealish was standing Carvalhal up and there was 15, 20 yards behind Carvalhal. And like the thing to do at that point was to risk possession, was to take him on and was to try and make something happen. And almost every time that night, Grealish shewed the opportunity to do that, passed it back inside, because you could see him thinking, this is what Pep wants me to do. He wants me to keep the ball. And I dare say even Pep that night realised actually the way to go at Madrid here is to get Grealish taking Carvalhal on, but he never did it. And I remember thinking that night, this is every bit as much on Pep as Grealish, that he's ended up in this state where he's got a 30-something-year-old right back and he's got the beating of him and there's no other route through. It's a very crowded, congested situation, and he refused to take him on that night. And I kind of thought, Yeah, Jack's only partly responsible for this.
Yeah, and if you pay £100 million for a player, you've got to try and make that player work. You have to accommodate them because you've got to answer to the bottom line of the club. OK, City is a club where finances aren't too much of a concern. But I suppose, is there an argument that if you introduce Haaland into the team, you've already got Grealish there, that there's the possibility that Guardiola may be eyeing the team being a bit more direct than it was before, a bit more using speed on the counter, attacks including far fewer passes.
Yeah,
I think that's a possibility. I think, again, because... OK, Manchester City are going, for this season, they're going for 5 out of 6 titles. The only previous teams to match that are Liverpool, obviously, 1970s, 1980s, and Manchester United. What was the thing that both those clubs did at the same time? They won the Champions League, of course, or the European Cup. Pep's ultimate goal is to find his way to win matches in by more ways than the one that keeps failing him on those big occasions. And it appears to me that maybe Grealish and Haaland could be the solution to that. Having said that, everything you say is correct, Joe, is that there's an uneasy relationship between him and Grealish, or there was, and there's a possibility that might be the case with Haaland. Manchester City, as I said, of the two big teams in the Premier League in the coming season, they're the ones with the bigger questions against them when they're the title holders.
Manchester United, the soap opera continues in various ways. Dean Henderson now on loan at Nottingham Forest. Only on loan at Nottingham Forest, so I don't know how his current employers, what they'll make of the interview he's given. So, in effect, he's talking about how miserable his time at Manchester United was. He burst on the scene, obviously, at Sheffield United in a big way, and then went back to Old Trafford on the promise that he would be number one. Effectively, De Gea got injured towards the end of season before last, and so there was a sense Henderson's ready to take the mantle. But then he had COVID, and De Gea's form improved, and suddenly De Gea was number one for the year. And so Henderson is, talking about how there were false promises made to him now. He said, I turned down so many good loan offers last summer for the reason that I was being told I'd be the number one. So I turned down loans moves in the summer. And then they wouldn't let me go. To sit there, waste 12 months is criminal, really, at my age. I was fuming. And then he says of this summer that he basically got out before Ten Hag could see him. So he said, I didn't really want the manager to see me in training because I knew he'd probably want to keep me. So his confidence is still intact, we can say, Henderson.
Yeah.
I suspect he's gone through personally a really difficult, horrible time, and now has done the interview, and it's been destroyed, but left, right and centre. Danny Mills leading the charge as self-pitying and emblematic of all that's wrong with Manchester United.
Again, with Dean Henderson, one of the greatest issues you've got is you've got this great confidence. That's clearly been his calling card as a player. You know, when he was back at Sheffield United, he was talking about being the Manchester United number one at a time when, David De Gea, you throw it forward 20, 30 years, David De Gea is the only Manchester United player that can really carry his bat from the last decade, really, or the last 7-8 years. You're asking a hell of a lot to step ahead of that. He was granted that chance. I'm thinking of a game against Liverpool, still in that sort of pandemic, behind closed door season, where it really didn't happen for him. He was made to look. There's one, internet meme at the time that showed that was deeply embarrassing for him. Now, this confidence aspect for him, he's always reminded me a little bit of Joe Hart. A similar style goalkeeper, actually, and similar confidence, and actually, funnily enough, a similar penalty saving technique in the shootout, from what I recall. Trying to put off the opponent. He's obviously a vibes type of guy, and in the doldrums in which Manchester United found themselves, that clearly wasn't appreciated. I don't think he's the only player who felt that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer had his favourites and then didn't look beyond them, or felt that promises were made to them and not kept. I think other players have been, well, not so publicly explicit about it, but read between the lines of the various post-mortems of the season and speak to people at the club, and there was a lot of that went on. But you mentioned the Grealish interview of being incredibly revealing. Henderson's attempted something similar, but it's not really had the same effect, has it? I think Grealish developed a lot of public sympathy. Grealish is he's quite an endearing character, isn't he, when he speaks? And Henderson hasn't managed to achieve that. It's an own goal. This is a player that I think was linked with Newcastle. He's gone to Forest, who an ambitious, promoted club. But that's one that rings alarm bells in the back office of clubs, isn't it? Well, this is the guy that complained about that, that appeared in all the papers. He seems to have shot himself in the foot there a little bit.
Just one other Manchester United question then before we move on, because I know there's always this sense of talking about them far too much, but Ten Hag has come out very publicly against Ronaldo and others, it must be said. I think Diogo Dalot was also guilty of leaving the Rayo Vallecano friendly at Old Trafford early. So Ronaldo played the first 45 minutes and then he was pictured leaving the game. And Erik ten Hag has described this as unacceptable. He said there were many more as well as Ronaldo who went home, and he's talked at length about how unacceptable this was. What's your read on the Ten Hag Ronaldo situation?
Well, when I read that had been his reaction, I felt it was absolutely the correct one. I think at a point before we've even kicked a ball, it's indicative of Manchester United that we're having these battles over players that should be leaving the club but aren't, and a new manager. Cast my mind back to this. There was a similar sort of dispute, not quite the same detail, between Rooney and David Moyes. Remember in that first summer when David Moyes took over, a battle of wits, and it's one that I don't think David Moyes won. Erik ten Hag, let's not play national stereotypes, but in that very sort of Dutch fashion was just, let's not mess around here. This is what I think about that. And Ronaldo, should he, well, I don't know if he even thinks like this, has to take his medicine for that. That's not how footballers behave. Okay, this is a 37-year-old, father, and, one of the great figures of the game, but you still can't behave like that. Alex Ferguson would have dressed down, Brian Robson, Steve Bruce for that type of behaviour. That's what goes on. And I also think from a political point of view, Ten Hag's played it correctly because, okay, there might still be a rump of Manchester United fans that still think Ronaldo is Ronaldo. Ronaldo, let's face it, Ronaldo is just about the only example that Manchester United fans have ever had of having the best player in the world playing for their team. So many great memories. But those are memories. And this is not the same Ronaldo. And this is a new manager. And he's got to stamp his authority. And this is a point where any sensible Manchester United fan, I would suggest, has to realise that Ronaldo's time is gone. This is a new manager. It's best for all that Ronaldo moves on. We've got another month of this to come, I'm sure. But, well said, Ten Hag and Diogo Dalot. Well, you've done nothing really as a Manchester United player. What do you think you're doing?
Invariably, we break the Premier League table up into various sections. So we have Man City and Liverpool. We have the chase from Spurs and Arsenal and Chelsea. And I presume they're still aspiring to Manchester United. We have then at the other end those who are relegation threatened. So we have the promoted sides, and we have Leeds who just avoided it. We have Everton who have just avoided it, and Southampton, I suppose, we can call mid-table-ish. What of that kind of middle section that we never spend too much time talking about? So you've got West Ham, who had such a great season last year. They finished 7th behind United. And then we have Leicester, still, 2016 lingers in the memory, but increasingly distant. We have Brighton, we have Wolves, Newcastle are a special case. They finished 11th last year. You've Crystal Palace, you've Brentford, you've Aston Villa. This middle section with upwardly mobile aspirations.
Yes, yeah, and something that quite a few of those clubs share in common is that they haven't done a lot of business so far. Now, there might be several reasons for that. There's a financial crisis going on. There are greater regulations. The market is perhaps not as fluid as it used to be. But West Ham, talking to somebody last night, they're pushing actually to almost 100 million of signings. And this person who would know, I don't think they were too sure about the players that West Ham have signed. David Moyes has been granted a bit of control over that. Can they be better last season? Well, the plan is to be so. But we are beginning to wonder if, he's actually had 2 really good seasons, hasn't he, David Moyes, at West Ham, to push on for that. But then you've got a slightly different thing. Newcastle. Now, Newcastle have found it difficult to sign players and are now doing something which is quite familiar from clubs that come into money, is they're trying to pick off those around them, specifically Leicester. Now, there was a bid that went in 50 million for Harvey Barnes a week or so ago. That was rejected. Now they're in for James Maddison. Now, Leicester, I think, are a club to watch because look at their squad and you will see that there's about 26, 27 professionals in them. You're only allowed 25. You've got to ship out, from what it is said, is that they're rather overgeared on wages. The players like Vestergaard they bought last season haven't worked out. They've got players like Ryan Bertrand who, I think he's got a year to go on his contract, but don't think he's got much of a place in the squad. And
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating.